Alright, so you want to know everything about the Dwemer. Every last detail about the Deep Elves, the most mysterious race in Elder Scrolls history. Well, buckle up because we're going down into the depths of Blackreach and beyond. This is gonna be a long one. The Dwemer, called dwarves by humans, though they were never actually short. Deep Elves, the lost race, the guys who built robot spiders and disappeared into thin air. If you've ever wandered through a Dwemer ruin in Skyrim or Morrowind, you know that feeling of walking through halls that are still lit, still functioning, thousands of years after their builders vanished. Steam still hissing through pipes, gears still turning, metal spiders still patrolling. It's eerie as hell. But who were they? Where did they come from? What were they trying to do? And most importantly, where the hell did they go? Let's start at the beginning. The Dwemer were elves, or Mer as they called themselves. They descended from the Aldmer, the original elves who lived on the Somerset Isles way back in the Merethic era. But here's the thing about the Dwemer. They were different from other elves from the very start. The name Dwemer comes from their own language, Dwemeris, and roughly translates to deep folk or people of the deep. Other translations suggest it means deep delving, profound or close counseled. They called themselves this because they lived underground, building massive cities beneath mountains. Humans called them dwarves because the first humans to encounter them were giants, and compared to giants, the Dwemer looked short. That's it, that's the whole reason. They weren't actually small, they were the same height as other elves, somewhere between 5.5 to 6.5 feet tall. What did they look like? Well, we have to piece this together from descriptions, and that one ghost you can briefly see in the Tribunal DLC if you're lucky. They had skin tones ranging from pale sand colors to slate blue-gray. Their hair was dark, blacks and browns mostly. And unlike other elves who went clean-shaven, Dwemer men often grew long beards. Think dwarves from fantasy, but elf height and not stocky. Their eyes were amber, brown, or blue. Living underground for generations had changed them from their Aldmeri roots. They could live around 300 years on average, though with magic, some pushed that to 500 or more. Pretty standard for elves. Here's where it gets interesting though. Every other race of Mer had some relationship with the gods. The Altmer wanted to transcend back to godhood. The Chimer worshipped the Daedric princes. The Bosmer had their green pact with Y'ffre. But the Dwemer, they looked at the gods and said, nah. The Dwemer were atheists, not in the sense that they didn't believe gods existed. They clearly knew the Aedra and Daedra were real. They just didn't think they deserved worship. To the Dwemer, gods were just beings with more power, nothing special, nothing sacred. They could be studied, understood, maybe even replicated or surpassed. This was radical. This was heresy to basically everyone else in Tamriel. But the Dwemer didn't care. They believed in logic, reason, and science over faith. They thought the world operated on laws that could be discovered and manipulated. Reality itself was something they could reshape if they understood it well enough. This philosophy led them to develop tonal architecture. Stay with me here, because this gets weird. The Dwemer believed that all of existence was basically a song, or maybe a story being told. The Aedra had created the world through sound and narrative, so if you could understand the underlying tones of reality, you could change reality itself by producing the right sounds at the right frequencies. Tonal architecture wasn't magic in the traditional sense. It was more like mathematics meets music meets engineering. The Dwemer would wear special torques that amplified their voices and protective headgear called tonal attenuators to protect their ears from the feedback. They could create massive resonators, huge architectural constructs filled with pipes and pistons that could manipulate the fundamental tones of existence. They used this for everything: mining operations, medicine, psychology. Ancient Chimer texts claimed the Dwemer could use tonal forces to bend weaker minds to their will through a kind of oral hypnosis. And eventually, they tried to use it to become gods themselves. Now let's talk about where they actually lived, because the Dwemer didn't just live underground for fun. They were isolationists by nature, and living in massive underground cities kept them separate from other races. Plus, being underground gave them access to geothermal energy and natural resources. Their main homeland was in what's now Morrowind, in a region they called Dwemer. This was the core of their civilization during the Merethic era and into the First Era. But they also spread to Skyrim, Hammerfell, High Rock, and even Solstheim. Let me paint you a picture of a Dwemer city. Imagine walking down a stone corridor. Bronze-colored metal pipes run along the walls and ceiling, occasionally hissing steam. The walls are carved with intricate geometric patterns and runes. You hear the sound of machinery somewhere in the distance, gears turning, pistons pumping. The air smells like metal and oil. Everything is built to last. The Dwemer were master architects. Their structures didn't decay. Books thousands of years old look brand new. Some scholars think they had some kind of preservative effect, maybe a device that controlled the laws of time and decay in their cities. The materials they used, this unique bronze-like metal that we can't replicate even now, it just doesn't rust or corrode. Different sections of their cities served different purposes. You'd have the Arcanex, where they did arcane studies, the Animonculary, where they manufactured their robot guardians, the Deep Venues, which were natural caverns they'd incorporated into their cities. Some cities, like Chardak, could produce a new automaton in a single day. And then there was Blackreach. Oh man, Blackreach, the crown jewel of Dwemer engineering in Skyrim. Blackreach wasn't just a city. It was a massive underground cavern that connected several Dwemer cities, Alftund, Mzinchalift, and Raltar. The ceiling glowed with bioluminescent lights. Giant glowing mushrooms, some taller than buildings, grew everywhere. The air was filled with a teal haze and floating mushroom spores. Massive geodes dotted the landscape. The Dwemer called it Falzardum Din in their language, and it was here, in the depths beneath Skyrim, that they made one of their most important discoveries, Ethereum. Around the year 221 of the First Era, something incredible happened. A rare blue crystal that glowed with an inner light and had powerful magical properties. They called it Ethereum. This stuff was unlike anything else. It was alchemically inert, you couldn't brew potions with it. It was harmonically volatile, it needed to be stored outdoors or in specially controlled environments. And it couldn't be worked with normal forging techniques. But if you could forge it properly, using the Ethereum forge they built deep beneath the city of Badoft, you could create artifacts with insane enchantments. 4 major Dwemer city-states formed an alliance to study and mine Ethereum. Arkhantums served as the command center and research facility. Ralbetar, located directly above Blackreach, handled the mining operations. Mzulft was the storage site. And Bitarzel, now called Deep Fold Crossing, had some role we're not entirely sure about, possibly experimentation. For a few years, this was golden. The 4 cities worked together, made breakthroughs, created powerful artifacts. But then, greed set in. Each city wanted independent control of the Ethereum forge and the incredible weapons and items it could produce. The alliance shattered. The 4 cities went to war with each other in what became known as the Ethereum Wars. This conflict lasted for decades, weakening all 4 city-states significantly. It's believed this internal fighting is why Hiking-Geller was able to conquer the Dwemer holdings in Skyrim when they'd successfully defended against Nord invasions for centuries before. The Ethereum Forge was sealed. The key to access it, the Ethereum Crest, was shattered into 4 pieces, and each city took 1 shard to prevent anyone else from using the forge. The location of the forge itself was eventually forgotten. Thousands of years later, a Nord researcher named Katria tried to find it. She died in the ruins of Arkningtums when an earthquake caused by pressure plates she triggered made her fall into a chasm. Her research was stolen by her apprentice, a Dunmer named Terran Dreth, who published it under his own name in a book called The Ethereum Wars. If you play Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC, you can actually find all 4 shards with Katria's ghost helping you, and you can access the forge to create one of 3 powerful artifacts, the Ethereal Crown, Shield, or Staff. Next up, we need to talk about the robots. because the Dwemer created some of the most advanced artificial beings ever seen in Tamriel, and they're still functioning perfectly well thousands of years after their creators disappeared. The Dwemer called these constructs animunculi. They're powered by, well, we're not entirely sure. Some have soul gems in them when you defeat them. Some scholars think they use perpetual motion somehow. Others think it's connected to tonal architecture and the harmonics of reality itself. Some Dwemer texts suggest the constructs were designed to draw power from a network connected to Red Mountain itself. Whatever the power source, these things were built to last. There are several types you'll encounter if you explore Dwemer ruins. Dwarven spiders are the smallest and most common. They're about the size of a large dog with 6 mechanical legs and a bulbous body. Some have crystals mounted on top that can fire lightning. They're fast, they're aggressive, and they come in swarms. They were used as workers and basic guards. When destroyed, they used to explode. But that explosion barely did any damage, so later iterations just removed that feature. Dwarven spheres are the mid-tier constructs. When inactive, they look like metal balls. When they detect an intruder, they unfold into a humanoid form standing on top of a rolling sphere. They've got blades for arms, and some later models have crossbows that fire bolts. They're much more dangerous than spiders and can move quickly while attacking. The sphere beneath them acts like a gyroscope, helping them balance. They have complex eye components for targeting. Dwarven centurions are the big boys. Think metal warriors twice the size of a person, sometimes even larger. They have an extendable mace or hammer on one arm and a spring-loaded blade on the other. And they can breathe steam that works like a shout, dealing significant damage. These things were war machines, pure and simple. When you encounter one in a dungeon, you know you've found the boss. They are tough as hell, resistant to almost everything, and hit like a freight train. But wait, there's more. In specific locations, you'll find other variants. Dwarven ballistae are stationary turrets that shoot powerful bolts. Dwarven sentries, also called theodolites, are spherical scouts that can generate electrical barriers to protect other constructs. Dwarven dynasters were massive carriage constructs that could deploy multiple spheres at once. And in the Reach area of Elder Scrolls Online, you'll find Dwarven architons, which are humanoid constructs specifically imbued with Ethereum crystals. Oh, and apparently they made a working Dwarven horse at some point that you can find and ride in Skyrim if you have the right Creation Club content. It can be killed and can sprint forever. Just to show off, probably. All of these constructs are resistant to pretty much everything except shock magic. Lightning disrupts the magic or mechanisms that animate them. They can't be soul-trapped, can't be reanimated, can't be detected by detect life or detect dead spells. They're not alive and they're not undead, they're something else entirely. But the animunculi were just the beginning, because the Dwemer had a much grander plan. They wanted to build a god. Not worship a god, not bargain with a god. Build one, from scratch. This is where Kagrenak comes in. Lord Kagrenak was the chief tonal architect, essentially the head of Dwemer magical engineering. He was brilliant, he was ambitious, and he was possibly insane. He believed the Dwemer could use tonal architecture to achieve divinity, to transcend their mortal limitations and become something greater. When the Dwemer discovered the heart of Lorkhan beneath Red Mountain, Kagrenak saw his opportunity. Let me back up. Lorkhan was the god who tricked or convinced the other Aedra into creating the mortal world, Mundus. This cost them most of their power. The other Aedra were pissed, so they killed Lorkhan, ripped his heart out, and threw it across the world. It landed in what would become Red Mountain in Morrowind, creating the volcano. The heart was no metaphor. It was a literal, physical heart that still beat with divine power. It was indestructible. Even the gods couldn't destroy it, so they just buried it and hoped nobody would find it. The Dwemer found it. Kagrenak created 3 tools to work with the heart. Wraithguard, a golden gauntlet that would let you safely handle the other tools. Without it, they'd kill you instantly. Sunder, a hammer that could strike the heart and release its divine energy. And Keening, a dagger that could focus and direct that energy. The plan was to use these tools to siphon the heart's power and channel it into a massive construct called the Numidium, also known as the brass god or enigmidium. This would be a brass golem of immense size. Accounts vary, but somewhere between hundreds to thousands of feet tall. It would be powered by divine energy and would have godlike abilities. What exactly Kagrenak intended to do with the Numidium is debated. Some think he wanted to make the entire Dwemer race immortal. Some think he wanted to elevate them to a higher plane of existence. Some think he wanted to use it as a weapon to conquer Tamriel and drive out the Chimer. Some scholars think the Dwemer wanted to use the Numidium to literally unmake reality itself and escape the dream of the godhead. Yeah, Elder Scrolls lore gets weird at the metaphysical level. Not all Dwemer agreed with this plan. A Dwemer named Beethund Mzanj wrote texts arguing against manipulating the heart, saying the risks were too great. The Rourken clan was so opposed to the direction their civilization was going that they left Morrowind entirely, moving to Hammerfell. According to legend, their leader threw the warhammer Volendrung as far as he could and vowed to settle wherever it landed. That's supposedly why Hammerfell got its name. But Kagrenak pushed forward with the project. Some accounts say King Dumak Dwarf King didn't even know about it. Either way, word got out. To understand what happened next, we need to talk about the Chimer. The Chimer were another offshoot of the Aldmer who'd left the Somerset Isles around the same time as the Dwemer, but for totally different reasons. Where the Dwemer were atheists focused on science, the Chimer were deeply religious, worshipping three Daedric princes, Azura, Boethia, and Mephala. The Dwemer and Chimer lived in the same region, what's now Morrowind, which the Chimer called Resdain. They fought constantly over territory, resources, and religious differences. The Chimer thought the Dwemer were godless blasphemers. The Dwemer thought the Chimer were primitive, superstitious fools. But then the Nords showed up. High King Rage the Gifted launched a major invasion of Resdain. The Dwemer and Chimer realized they had a common enemy, so they formed an alliance. Indoril Nerevar, the great Chimer hero, and Dumak Dwarf King, the Dwemer king, became friends and united their people in the First Council. Together, they drove the Nords back. This alliance held for centuries. It was an uneasy peace, but it was peace. Then, Vorin Dagoth, head of House Dagoth, discovered what Kagrenak was doing with the heart of Lorkhan. He reported this to Nerevar. Nerevar consulted with Azura, who confirmed this was real and very bad. Nerevar confronted his old friend Dumak. Dumak claimed he didn't know what Kagrenak was doing. Maybe he was telling the truth, maybe not. Either way, Nerevar issued an ultimatum: stop the work on the heart or face war. The First Council shattered. The War of the First Council began. Before we get to the war's climax, we need to talk about the Snow Elves, because the Dwemer did something truly awful to them. The Falmer, that's their proper name, meaning Snow Elves, in the Elven language, were another race of Mer who lived in Skyrim during the Merethic era. They had pale skin, white hair, and were gifted with magic. They built a sophisticated civilization across Skyrim before humans showed up. Then came the Night of Tears. The reasons are disputed, but there was some kind of conflict between the early Nords from Atmora and the Falmer. Maybe it was over territory. Maybe it was over an artifact the Falmer discovered at Sarthal called the Eye of Magnus. Whatever the cause, the Falmer attacked the human settlement of Sarthal and massacred almost everyone there. The survivors fled back to Atmora and returned with an army. Ysgramor and his 500 companions launched a genocidal campaign against the Falmer. The war lasted generations. The Falmer were losing badly. Their leader, the Snow Prince, was killed. Their civilization was collapsing. They were facing complete extinction. In desperation, the surviving Falmer turned to the Dwemer for help. The Dwemer agreed to shelter them in their underground cities, but there was a price. The Dwemer forced the Falmer to eat toxic fungi that grew in Blackreach. This fungus rendered them blind. Not just the current generation, the toxin was built into their diet so permanently that all future generations would be blind too. The Dwemer didn't do this by accident. This was calculated. They wanted the Falmer weak and dependent. The Snow Elves became servants, then slaves. Ancient torture chambers found in Dwemer ruins were likely used to keep them in line. Over generations, living underground, enslaved, blind, eating nothing but toxic mushrooms, the Falmer devolved. Their skin became pale and twisted. They hunched over. They became feral and savage. They lost their culture, their history, their civilization. They became the creatures you fight in Skyrim's dungeons, the betrayed, as the few remaining uncorrupted snow elves called them. Eventually, the Falmer rebelled. The War of the Crag began, with the Falmer rising up against their Dwemer masters. The war raged for decades in the depths of Blackreach, completely unknown to the surface world. But before either side could win, something happened that ended the war instantly. The Dwemer disappeared. Alright, let's get to it. The biggest mystery in Elder Scrolls lore. What happened to every single Dwemer across all of Tamriel in the same instant in the year 700 of the First Era? The War of the First Council had been raging for years. There are multiple conflicting accounts of the Battle of Red Mountain itself, which isn't surprising given that this battle apparently caused a dragon break, a moment where linear time fractured and multiple contradictory timelines all became true simultaneously. Here's what most accounts agree on. Nerevar, along with 3 of his generals, who would later become the Tribunal, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotasil, plus Vor and Dagoth, fought their way into Red Mountain. They reached the Heart Chamber where Kagranak had built his equipment to manipulate the heart of Lorkhan. Dumak was there, Kagranak was there, fighting broke out. Dumak was killed, various accounts say by Nerevar, or by the Nord hero Wulfarth, or by a Khajiit named Drozira. With Dumak fallen and Nerevar pressing the attack, Kagranak turned to his tools. He struck the heart, and every single Dwemer across Tamriel vanished. Gone in an instant. Not just the ones in Red Mountain, not just the ones in Morrowind. Every Dwemer in Skyrim, Hammerfell, High Rock, Solstheim, everywhere. Thousands, maybe millions of people, poof, vanished. What happened to them? That's the big question that's never been answered. Theory 1 is that they were destroyed utterly, erased from existence. Kagranak made a catastrophic mistake with the tools and accidentally deleted his entire race. Theory 2 is that they were transformed into something else. Maybe they were absorbed into the Numidium, their souls becoming part of the brass god. Maybe they were turned to ash. The piles of ash you find in Dwemer ruins might be them. Maybe they achieved their goal and ascended to a higher plane of existence, becoming something beyond mortal comprehension. Theory 3 is that they exist but are trapped somewhere, maybe in a pocket dimension, maybe between dimensions, maybe scattered across oblivion. One NPC in Skyrim, a wizard named Falion, claims he's seen the Dwemer while traveling the plains of oblivion. Theory 4 gets into weird dragon break stuff. Multiple timelines happened simultaneously. The Dwemer succeeded, failed, were destroyed, were saved, turned to gods, and were unmade all at the same time. And when time became linear again, the result was that they just weren't there anymore. We don't know. Bethesda has kept this mystery alive through multiple games across decades. Todd Howard has said he's not interested in bringing the Dwemer back or definitively explaining what happened to them. The mystery is more interesting than any answer would be. Well, almost every Dwemer vanished. There's one exception we know of for certain. In Morrowind, deep in the Corpusarium beneath Thelfire, you can meet Yagrum Bagarn. He's the last living Dwemer. He's also massively obese and infected with the Corpus disease, which has left him bloated and sick, but also somewhat immortal. He moves around on the lower half of a modified Centurion spider. Yagrum was a master crafter who worked for Lord Kagranak himself, though he didn't work directly on the Numidium project. When the Dwemer disappeared, Yagrum was traveling in an outer realm, some dimension outside of Mundus. When he returned, he found his entire race gone. He's been searching for them ever since, traveling all across Tamriel, exploring every Dwemer ruin, finding nothing but empty cities and working machines. Eventually, he contracted Corpus, which drove him mad. The ancient Tilvani wizard Divithe Fire took him in and restored much of his sanity, though he couldn't cure the disease. Yagrum helps Far with his research and shares his knowledge with the player in Morrowind. He's written several books documenting Dwemer artifacts. If you talk to him about the disappearance, he admits he has no idea what happened. He's come up with theories, but nothing conclusive. He's read Kagranak's writings, including Divine Metaphysics, which detailed Kagranak's theories on using the heart. But Yagrum won't explain those theories to anyone else. He believes Kagranak's ideas should die with him. By the time of Skyrim in the 4th era, reports of Yagrum's survival are known across Tamriel. Some scholars reference him, but we don't know if he's still alive or if the corpus disease has finally claimed him after thousands of years. The Dwemer might be gone, but their impact on Tamriel is massive. Their ruins dot the landscape of multiple provinces. Their automatons still guard their halls. Their artifacts are sought after by scholars and adventurers alike. The metal they used, this bronze-like alloy we call Dwarven metal, can't be replicated. We don't know how they made it. It's incredibly durable and valuable. Smiths can melt down Dwemer scrap metal to make ingots and forge Dwarven armor and weapons, which are some of the best medium-tier equipment you can get. But we're not creating new Dwarven metal, we're just recycling what they left behind. Their automatons remain active and hostile to intruders. Some scholars, like Calcelmo of Markarth, spend their entire lives studying Dwemer ruins and technology. Neramo, a researcher in Elder Scrolls Online, has managed to reprogram some automatons to serve him. But we're nowhere close to understanding how to build new ones from scratch. The city of Markarth in Skyrim is built into an old Dwemer city. The architecture is still standing, still functional. The water systems work. The mechanisms still turn. After thousands of years, that's the level of engineering the Dwemer achieved. Some of their artifacts remain scattered across Tamriel. The Dwemer puzzle box that Septimus Signus tries to open in Skyrim. The ethereal artifacts you can forge. Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard, Kagranak's tools that led to their disappearance, can be found in various games. Oh, and the Numidium? It was eventually completed after the Dwemer disappeared. Sotasil and the Tribunal figured out how to activate it. They gave it to Tiber Septim, who used it to conquer the rest of Tamriel and establish the Third Empire. The thing was basically a reality-warping superweapon. It was destroyed in the Warp in the West at the end of the Second Era. So yeah, even in death, or disappearance, or whatever happened to them, the Dwemer shaped the history of Tamriel. Let's talk about how the Dwemer have appeared, or not appeared, across the Elder Scrolls games over the years. Arena from 1994 had Dwemer ruins as dungeons, but they were pretty simple, just places to explore for loot. The lore wasn't super developed yet. Daggerfall from 1996 had more Dwemer content and started building out the mystery. You could find books about them. Their disappearance was mentioned as this huge unsolved mystery. Morrowind from 2002 is where the Dwemer lore really exploded. The main plot revolves around what happened at Red Mountain. You explore multiple Dwemer ruins, each with its own layout and purpose. You meet Yagrum Bagarn. You learn about Tonal architecture. You use Kagranak's tools. The ghost of a Dwemer can be briefly seen in the Tribunal expansion if you're lucky. The ruins in Morrowind feel truly alien. Lots of pipes, steam, lava channels. The aesthetic is very steampunk mixed with ancient bronze. You fight Centurion spheres and spiders and steam Centurions. The ruins often have multiple levels, with the deep sections requiring levitation to access certain areas. Oblivion from 2006 doesn't have much Dwemer content since Cyrodiil wasn't part of their core territory. There's the Orrery at the Arcane University, but that was built by Imperials using imported Dwemer machinery. Skyrim from 2011 brought the Dwemer back in a big way. The ruins in Skyrim are massive and numerous. You explore places like Blackreach, which is absolutely stunning. The automatons got major visual upgrades. The lore about the Ethereum Wars was added with the Dawnguard DLC. You find more books, more artifacts, more mysteries. The ruins in Skyrim feel more like factories than the ones in Morrowind. Lots of conveyor belts, presses, industrial equipment. everything is made of stone and that bronze metal, and they're infested with Falmer now, adding another layer to the story. Elder Scrolls Online, from 2014 to the present, has expanded Dwemer content across multiple expansions. The Greymore chapter lets you explore a version of Blackreach in the Second Era. You learn more about their relationship with the Snow Elves. You see more variants of automatons. You find more ruins across different provinces. ESO also added some interesting lore. In Hrothgar, you learn about the Rourken clan and their split from the main Dwemer civilization. In Morrowind, you can explore in Chuliftinth and other ruins. The game shows you the Dwemer at their height, when their machines were new and their cities were recently abandoned rather than ancient. Legends from 2017 has Dwemer cards. You can play as Yagrum Bagarn. Various Dwemer constructs and artifacts appear. Through all these games, Bethesda has been really careful not to answer the central mystery. We learn more and more about Dwemer culture, technology, and philosophy. But what happened to them? That stays mysterious. Now, let's dig into what we know about how the Dwemer actually lived before they vanished. Their cities were independent city-states rather than one unified empire. Different clans ruled different cities. The Kragan clan controlled Arkenthums. The Rourken clan left for Hammerfell. Other clans expanded into Skyrim. Each had its own priorities and sometimes came into conflict with each other, like the Ethereum Wars. Leadership seems to have been based on merit and achievement rather than birth. King Damak was the leader of the first council, but individual cities had their own rulers and councils. The chief tonal architect was clearly an important position, like Gagrinak. They had a written language, Dwemerus, which is only partially translated. We can read some words and phrases. Volen means hammer. Fel means city. So, Volenfell means city of the hammer. The text on Dwemer runes uses geometric runes that vary by region, suggesting different dialects or writing systems between clans. They kept detailed records. Many Dwemer books were written in Aldmeris rather than Dwemerus, making them accessible to modern scholars, though plenty are still in untranslated Dwemerus. They documented their research, their history, their philosophy. Books like Divine Metaphysics contain Kagranak's theories, though understanding them requires deep knowledge of Dwemerus. The Dwemer were hierarchical. You had the tonal architects at the top, the engineer mages who understood tonal architecture. Below them were regular craftsmen, smiths, and workers. And at the bottom were slaves, primarily the Falmer in their holdings in Skyrim. They traded with other races when necessary, but generally kept to themselves. Their isolationist tendencies meant they didn't have many friends. The Chimer were their neighbors and frequent enemies. The Nords tried to conquer them multiple times. They saw other races as inferior. Religious-wise, we've covered their atheism. But it wasn't just non-belief. They actively studied the gods with the goal of understanding and potentially surpassing them. The precepts of Kagrenak were taught in Dwemer settlements like Keraka, where scholars spent their time contemplating their relationship to the heart of Lorkhan and their place in existence. Their rejection of faith defined them. While the Altmer wanted to return to divinity, the Dwemer wanted to create their own divinity. While the Chimer worshipped Daedra, the Dwemer built machines. This philosophical difference is what made them so unusual in Tamriel. Alright, let's go wild with some theories about the Dwemer. The community has been speculating about these guys for decades. The zero-sum theory suggests the Dwemer achieved Kim, or attempted to, and failed. Kim is this complex metaphysical concept in Elder Scrolls lore where you realize you're part of the Godhead's dream but assert your individuality anyway. Most who tried this zero-sum, they realize they're not real and cease to exist. Maybe the entire Dwemer race tried this simultaneously, and all zero-summed at once. The Skin of the Numidium theory proposes that the Dwemer didn't disappear. They became part of the Numidium. Their souls, their essence, their existence was absorbed into the brass god. The Numidium walks around powered by the collective consciousness of an entire race. Some texts refer to the Numidium skin as being made from the skin of the gods. Maybe it was made from the Dwemer themselves. The calling theory suggests the Dwemer heard or felt something from another plane of existence and all traveled there at once. Not destroyed, not transformed, but relocated. Maybe they found a way to leave Mundus entirely and escape to somewhere else, some realm of oblivion or Ethereus or somewhere beyond. The Brass Tower theory gets into even weirder metaphysics. The Numidium is also known as the Brass Tower or Numidium. In Elder Scrolls cosmology, there are towers that hold reality together. Maybe activating the Numidium created a paradox or broke something in the structure of reality, and the Dwemer paid the price. The punishment theory, maybe one of the gods they denied, actually intervened. Azura cursed the Chimer for breaking their oath to her, turning them into the Dwemer with grey skin and red eyes. Maybe another deity punished the Dwemer for their hubris, though this seems unlikely given the Dwemer's understanding of how the gods work. The accident theory is the simplest. Kagrenak just screwed up. He thought he knew what he was doing with the tools and the heart, but he was wrong. The tonal frequencies were off, the calculation was wrong. And when he struck the heart, the resulting wave of tonal energy disintegrated or displaced every Dwemer across Tamriel because they were all connected somehow. The success theory flips it. Maybe Kagrenak did exactly what he intended. Maybe the goal was always to transcend mortal existence, and he succeeded. The Dwemer are now something beyond our comprehension. They've achieved their version of godhood and exist on a higher plane. From their new perspective, we're like ants. They don't care about Tamriel anymore. Some fans think the ash piles you find in Dwemer ruins are the remains of the Dwemer. But this doesn't quite work because you find those same ash piles in ruins across multiple provinces, and we know the Dwemer disappeared simultaneously everywhere. Plus, the ash piles respawn in gameplay, which is probably just a game mechanic thing, but still. Here's a dark one. Maybe the Dwemer are still conscious but trapped. Imagine being locked in a state between existence and non-existence, aware but unable to interact with reality for thousands of years. That would be worse than death. Let's look at how the Dwemer stack up against other races in Tamriel technologically and philosophically. The Altmer of the Somerset Isles are master mages and have sophisticated culture, but they're traditionalists who look backward to a golden age. The Dwemer looked forward. Where Altmer magic is about elegance and ancestral knowledge, Dwemer tonal architecture was about pushing boundaries and breaking rules. The Dunmer, formerly Chimer, eventually embraced some Dwemer technology after they disappeared. Great House Tilvani wizards study Dwemer ruins. The entire city of Markarth is built into a Dwemer settlement. But the Dunmer never understood the Dwemer fully. They used Dwemer artifacts without understanding the principles behind them. The Imperials are engineers and bureaucrats who've built an empire across Tamriel, but their technology is mundane: aqueducts, roads, forts. Nothing close to self-powered automatons that function for millennia. The Imperials respect Dwemer achievements but can't replicate them. The Nords fought the Dwemer for centuries and never really understood them. To the Nords, the Dwemer were just strange elves who hid underground and built weird machines. Nord culture values strength and honor in combat, everything the Dwemer didn't care about. The Red Guards encountered the Rourken clan in Hammerfell and eventually conquered their settlements. But like everyone else, they can't recreate Dwemer technology. They just use what's left behind. The Orcs actually have an interesting connection. Orsinium was built near old Dwemer ruins, and Orcs are master smiths themselves. Some Orcish smithing techniques might have been influenced by salvaged Dwemer equipment, but Orcish smithing, while excellent, is conventional metallurgy. The Dwemer were doing something else entirely. The Khajiit have moon sugar and skooma, but no particular advancement in technology. Their culture is so different from the Dwemer that there's barely any overlap. The Argonians are deeply connected to the Hiss trees and their swamp homeland. They're probably the race least interested in Dwemer stuff, because it's all so foreign to their way of life. The Bosmer are bound by the Green Pact and can't harm plants. They're not going to develop advanced technology in the traditional sense, total opposite of the Dwemer approach. The Bretons are mixed human-elf descendants who lean heavily into magic. They appreciate Dwemer artifacts, but approach them as magical items rather than understanding the engineering principles. The point is, no race in Tamriel has come close to matching what the Dwemer achieved. Some of the most brilliant minds across multiple eras have studied Dwemer ruins and artifacts. The tribunal gods themselves, literal gods, couldn't fully understand all of Kagranak's work, though they eventually figured out enough to activate the Numidium. Yagrum Bagarn says he spent decades after the disappearance traveling Tamriel, and he never found anyone who truly understood Dwemer principles. Modern scholars like Calselmo can translate some Dwemer texts and understand pieces of their technology, but the complete picture? Lost with them. Let's talk about the Dwemer language, because it's actually really interesting. Dwemer's is only partially translated. We know some words. Dwemer itself means deep ones or deep folk. The prefix nch or nchu often starts city names: Nchardak, Nchuleft, Nchuleftingt. Betar appears in names like Betarzel and Betardams. Mzet starts places like Mzulft and Mzinkaleft. Different clans seem to have had different naming conventions. Cities in Morrowind have different name structures than cities in Skyrim. This could mean different dialects or different clan traditions. The written language uses geometric runes. These vary by region too. Skyrim ruins have different runic patterns than Morrowind ruins. Some scholars think this is because different clans developed their own scripts over time after spreading out from their homeland. Most surviving Dwemer books are actually written in Aldmeris, the ancient Elven language, rather than Dwemeris. This makes sense. If you want other people to read your work, write in a common language. Books meant for internal use were probably in Dwemeris, which is why we have so few translated texts. Calselmo of Markarth has made the most progress in translating Dwemeris in the 4th era. He's created a Dwemer dictionary and translation guide, though it's still incomplete. His research is valuable enough that the Thieves Guild gets hired to steal it in Skyrim. The player can sell that translation to multiple buyers, because everyone wants to understand Dwemer texts. We know that Dwemer had words for abstract concepts. Kagranak's book, Divine Metaphysics, uses Dwemer technical terminology that doesn't translate well into other languages. Terms describing tonal frequencies, metaphysical states, and the nature of reality itself. Without understanding the context and the philosophy behind these terms, translation becomes guesswork. Some Dwemer words we know. Bond was someone's name, meaning something like allied or oath-bonded. Wollendrung combines wollen, hammer, with something else. Keening and Sunder are actually common Tamrielic translations of Dwemer names for the tools, not their original Dwemer's names. The language appears to have complex grammatical structures. Compound words are common. Adjectives modifying nouns often become prefixes. This makes translation tricky because you need to know where one word ends and another begins. Interestingly, Dwemer automatons don't seem to require verbal commands. They operate autonomously or respond to specific sounds or frequencies. This fits with their tonal architecture philosophy, control through precise tones rather than spoken language. Let's tour some of the most significant Dwemer sites you can visit in the games. Bams am Shend in Mournhold, which you see in Morrowind's Tribunal DLC, is one of the most extensive Dwemer ruins in the series. It's directly beneath the city of Mournhold. Multiple levels, tons of loot, and it's where you find Barilzar's Mazet Band, an artifact that's essential to the Tribunal main quest. The ruins here feel ancient, even by Dwemer standards, because they were already old when Mournhold was founded on top of them. Arknithams in Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC is where the Ethereum quest begins. It's built into a mountain overlooking a river. The ruins are partially collapsed, and the whole place is rigged with lethal traps. Pressure plates trigger earthquakes. There's a tonal lock, which is a door that only opens when you shoot the right tonal resonators in sequence. This is where Katria died, and her ghost helps you navigate the place. Bothardams in Skyrim is associated with a Daedric quest for Period. It's been taken over by Afflicted, who are people infected with a magical plague. The ruin is massive, with multiple zones including Bothardams, Upper District, Workshop, Study, Dwelling, Lower District, and Arcanex. The variety of sections shows how complex Dwemer cities were. We've talked about Blackreach, but it deserves another mention. The sheer scale is incredible. The first time you emerge from Alftund into Blackreach and see the massive caverns stretching into the distance, the glowing mushrooms, the ancient city ruins, it's one of the most memorable moments in Skyrim. You can spend hours exploring Blackreach. There's the Silent City ruins in the center, the giant glowing orb hanging from the ceiling, multiple Dwemer elevators leading to different surface locations, and even a hidden dragon you can summon by using unrelenting force on the giant glowing orb. Nchardak in Skyrim's Dragonborn DLC on Solstheim is unique because it was a pumping station. The entire facility was built to extract geothermal energy from below and pump water. The control cubes you need to operate the pumps are still functional. Getting them working again is a puzzle involving redirecting power, and it's one of the better dungeon quests in the Dragonborn DLC. The Kagrumez Resonance Gems, found here and in Kagrumez, are Dwemer artifacts that work as keys. Turenulal, also called Kagrenak's Library, is a citadel in Morrowind. This is where Divaith Fire houses Yagrum Bagarn. It's deep below Tel Fire. The library itself contains books and research notes, though most are rotted or illegible after thousands of years. Alftund in Skyrim is your typical entry point into Blackreach. What makes it interesting is you find Sula, Trebasius, and Umana, two researchers who went mad searching for the Elder Scroll. Their descent into paranoia and violence is documented in journals you find throughout the ruin. By the time you catch up to them, they're fighting each other to the death. Shows what Dwemer ruins can do to people's minds if they're not careful. Mzincha in Skyrim contains the Grim Sever, a unique glass sword. The ruin is relatively small compared to others, but it has all the standard Dwemer features with spiders, spheres, centurions, and lots of metal to salvage. Ralbathar in Skyrim sits right above Blackreach. It's the site of a major Falmer infestation and has a unique mechanism called the Attunement Sphere that's needed to access Blackreach. The Khajiit puzzle door here is interesting because instead of dragon claws, you need to use the Attunement Sphere from the main quest. Nchuanzel is the Dwemer Museum beneath Understone Keep in Markarth. It's not a traditional ruin because Calselmo has converted it into a research facility and museum. He keeps his Dwemer artifacts here, his laboratory, and his translation guide. The place is technically illegal to enter without permission, but thieves don't care about that. Each of these locations tells you something different about the Dwemer. Some were residential, some were military, some were research facilities, some were industrial. The variety shows they had a complex, multifaceted civilization rather than just being the machine elves. Beyond the automatons, the Dwemer left behind loads of interesting items and artifacts. Dwemer coins are actually pretty worthless in gameplay, but lore-wise, they're interesting. They had their own currency system. The coins are made of that distinctive bronze-colored metal. There's something called the Dwemer Coherer, which is a weird artifact from Morrowind. It looks like a ceramic bowl with metal parts. No one's quite sure what it does. Some think it's a communication device. Others think it's part of a larger machine. You need one for a museum quest, but its actual purpose remains mysterious. The Dwemer puzzle box is another interesting one. Septimus Signus has one in Skyrim. Inside is an Elder Scroll. The box is locked with mechanisms so complex that even after studying it for years, Septimus can't open it normally. He ends up using the blood of all the elven races in a ritual to open it. The craftsmanship suggests it was specifically designed to contain something important and keep it protected. In Nchardak, you'll find Dwemer convectors. These are cube-shaped power sources that slot into receptacles to activate Dwemer machinery. They glow and hum when active. The fact that they still work after 4,000 years is typical Dwemer over-engineering. The Attunement Sphere is given to you in Skyrim's main quest. It's a golden orb that acts as a key to access Blackreach. It reacts to specific Dwemer mechanisms, causing them to activate. How it works is never explained, but it's clearly some form of harmonic key that responds to tonal frequencies. We've discussed the Ethereum shards before, but they're worth mentioning again. 4 crystalline shards that fit together to form the Ethereum crest. Each piece was held by one of the cities involved in the Ethereum wars. The shards themselves are beautiful, glowing blue-green crystal that pulses with light. Then there's the mundane stuff you find everywhere in ruins. Dwemer cog, scrap metal, bent Dwemer scrap metal, all of this can be smelted into Dwarven metal ingots. A large decorative Dwemer strut weighs 20 pounds and smelts into 3 ingots. Small gears and screws are everywhere. All of it is valuable because we can't make more. Volendrung is technically a Daedric artifact now, but it started as a Dwemer warhammer. The Rourken clan's leader threw it across Tamriel and founded Volenfell, later Hammerfell, where it landed. The hammer was eventually transformed into a Daedric artifact when Malakath claimed it. It's a 2-handed hammer that drains stamina from enemies and transfers it to the wielder. Spellbreaker is another case of Dwemer craftsmanship becoming a Daedric artifact. This shield was originally Dwemer made, but is now associated with Periate. It's one of the best shields in multiple Elder Scrolls games because of its ward ability. Then we've got Wraithguard, Sunder, and Keening, which are Kagrinak's tools. Wraithguard is a massive golden gauntlet that looks almost like a prosthetic forearm. Sunder is a hammer. Keening is a dagger. In Morrowind, you need all 3 to finish the main quest. Without Wraithguard, touching Sunder or Keening kills you instantly because you're not protected from the divine energies they channel. Even with Wraithguard, using Keening drains your health constantly. In later games, Keening appears without Wraithguard, and it doesn't kill you instantly anymore. Either the enchantments have faded over time, or game mechanics changed. In Skyrim, you can find Keening, and it's just a unique dagger with some soul trap enchantment. Nothing like the god-killing tool it once was. Then there's Dwarven armor and weapons, which are technically not authentic Dwemer items, but replicas made by modern smiths from salvaged materials. Dwarven armor is heavy armor that looks bulky and mechanical. Dwarven weapons have that same bronze color. They are good mid-game equipment. The aesthetic is very industrial, with lots of rivets, bolts, and mechanical details. Some theorize that what we call Dwarven equipment isn't actually weapons and armor at all. That Dwarven warhammer might have been an actuator arm. That Dwarven greatsword could be a piston blade from a larger device. We're basically scrapping their machines and beating the metal into shapes we can use. There are also these cubes called Dwemer lexicons, which are some kind of data storage device. You find several in Skyrim. They slot into Dwemer receptacles and seem to record or store information. The one you use in Alfdand records information from the oculary and becomes the runed lexicon. How they store information, whether it's mechanical, magical, or something else, we don't know. Okay, this is stretching it, but hear me out. The Ogma Infinium was made by Xarxes from the skin of Hermaeus Mora's enemies. But some theories suggest Dwemer souls might be trapped in Apocrypha, Hermaeus Mora's realm of oblivion, which would make them part of his collection of forbidden knowledge. So, maybe reading the Ogma Infinium is consuming Dwemer wisdom. Probably not, but it's a fun idea. Let's get technical about the Dwemer automatons, because there's more to them than just robot enemies. The term animunculi comes from alchemy, and it refers to artificial beings. The Dwemer applied this concept literally, creating artificial mechanical beings. But how do they work? The power source is the big mystery. We find soul gems in some destroyed automatons, but not all of them. Some scholars think that Dwemer discovered a way to create artificial souls or life force. Others think it's perpetual motion machines, which shouldn't be possible but apparently are for the Dwemer. The most interesting theory is that all Dwemer automatons are connected to a central power source, possibly something at Red Mountain, through harmonic resonance. They're all tuned to the same tonal frequency, and that frequency carries power to them across any distance. This would explain why they all still work. It would explain why they don't need to recharge or refuel. It would explain why they are found in working condition in ruins that have been sealed for thousands of years. The central power source is still active, still broadcasting, and the automatons still receive it. When it comes to intelligence and behavior, Dwemer constructs aren't very smart by modern standards. They patrol set routes. They attack intruders on sight. They follow basic programmed behaviors. But they're not completely mindless. Spheres will take cover and use tactics. Centurions will prioritize dangerous targets. They can navigate complex environments and avoid falling off cliffs, usually. Some higher-end constructs show more advanced behavior. The Theodolites, or sentries, can deploy barriers to protect other automatons. That requires some level of tactical assessment. The Forge Master in Nchardak can operate machinery and direct other constructs. That's sophisticated AI for a mechanical being. Neremo in ESO manages to reprogram some automatons to be non-hostile. This suggests they have some form of reprogrammable logic, not just hard-coded instructions. Yagrum Bagarn rides around on a modified Centurion spider, meaning the things can be modified and controlled if you know how. As for construction materials, the outer shells are made of Dwarven metal, that bronze-colored alloy we can't recreate. Inside, you find gears, pistons, springs, and other mechanical parts. But there's more. Some constructs have crystal components that seem to channel magic or store power. The spheres have complex eye assemblies with lenses and focusing crystals. The joints use some kind of lubricant or fluid that never dries out or degrades. The metal never rusts or corrodes, even in wet environments like Blackreach. Whatever treatment or alloy composition they used, it's permanent. For sensors and detection, automatons can detect intruders through some combination of sight, sound, and probably vibration. They're not fooled by invisibility alone. You need both invisibility and silence to sneak past them reliably. They can track moving targets and lead their shots if they have ranged weapons. The eyes on spheres and centurions glow when active. This might be decorative, or it might be part of their visual sensors. Spiders don't have eyes in the traditional sense. They have sensor arrays on their heads that detect threats. Looking at variants by region, constructs in different regions show slight variations. Skyrim automatons look different from Morrowind automatons. This could be because different clans built them, or because they were made at different times using evolved designs. The Kaguri-shaped construct at Betongtoms is unique. It's a Centurion-class automaton, but shaped like a Kaguri instead of humanoid. This shows that Dwemer could create animunculi in any form they wanted. They chose mostly spiders, spheres, and humanoids, but that was preference, not limitation. When it comes to maintenance and repair, automatons seem capable of basic self-repair or at least self-maintenance. Otherwise, they'd have all broken down centuries ago. Maybe they return to charging stations when damaged. Maybe the tonal frequency that powers them also provides repair instructions. We don't know, but they clearly don't need Dwemer technicians to keep running. Some ruins have what look like repair stations or construction bays. You'll find inactive automatons in alcoves or on platforms. Are these storage, recharge stations, construction stations for new units? The animonculary sections of Dwemer cities were clearly dedicated to building and maintaining these things. For combat capabilities, let's be real, these things are dangerous. Spiders come in swarms and can overwhelm you with numbers. Their lightning variants are particularly nasty. Spheres are fast, mobile, and can kill you before you realize they've unfolded. Centurions are boss-level threats with massive health pools, heavy armor, and devastating attacks. The Forge Master class is a Centurion variant that appears in some ruins. It's even tougher than regular Centurions and is usually a unique encounter. The hulking Draugr? Wait, no, wrong enemy type. Though imagine if the Dwemer had combined their technology with necromancy, mechanized undead warriors. Thank the gods they didn't go there. When it comes to modern use, people try to control or use animunculi with limited success. You can get the Dwemer Sphere Centurion as a follower in Skyrim with the Dawnguard DLC. You find its control rod in Kagrumes. Having a personal automaton is pretty cool, though it's weaker than late-game followers. Various researchers and mages have attempted to create new automatons using Dwemer parts and principles. None have succeeded in creating anything like the originals. We can fix them, we can modify them, but we can't build new ones. The knowledge is lost. The Dwemer weren't just good at making robots. They had advanced knowledge in multiple fields. When it comes to astronomy, they built observatories. The Oculary in Mzulft is an advanced astronomical device that can locate powerful magical artifacts across Tamriel. It uses lenses, mirrors, focusing crystals, and some kind of scanning beam. The player uses it in Skyrim to locate the Staff of Magnus. The device is accurate enough to pinpoint an artifact's location to within a small radius from hundreds of miles away. The fact that this device still works perfectly after thousands of years, despite being partially damaged, shows how well built their equipment was. Modern mages can't create anything close to this level of sophisticated magical detection and astronomical calculation. Their understanding of acoustics was obviously advanced, given their whole tonal architecture thing. But beyond the mystical applications, they understood sound propagation, resonance, harmonics, and frequencies at an advanced level. The tonal locks in their ruins require you to hit resonators in specific sequences, showing they could create precise acoustic puzzles. For geothermal engineering, Enchartic was a pumping station that extracted and utilized geothermal energy from deep underground. The fact that they could tap into volcanic activity safely and use it to power their cities is impressive. Red Mountain, an active volcano, had Dwemer facilities built near its heart. They weren't afraid of lava. Their hydraulics knowledge shows in many Dwemer ruins with complex water and steam systems. Pipes carry fluids throughout their cities. Some mechanisms use hydraulic pressure. The pumps in Enchardak could move massive volumes of water. All of this still functions. In metallurgy, the Dwarven metal alloy alone proves they were master metallurgists, but they also worked with other materials. They forged items that modern smiths can't replicate even when using the exact same raw materials. There was something in their forging process, temperatures, techniques, alchemical treatments that we don't understand. Their optics work is shown in the lenses and crystals they used, demonstrating advanced understanding of light manipulation. Focus crystals that can concentrate magical energy, mirrored surfaces that don't tarnish. The eye assemblies in their automatons have complex lens systems. Mathematics was obviously crucial. You don't build cities that last millennia without serious math. The precision in their architecture, the balance of their mechanisms, the calculations required for tonal architecture, all of this required advanced mathematics. Some Dwemer texts contain mathematical formulas that modern scholars can barely interpret. When it comes to medicine, okay, this one is speculation because we don't have much concrete information, but Yagrum Bagarn mentions the Dwemer had knowledge of medicine. Given their approach to everything else, they probably applied engineering principles to biology, mechanical organ replacements, surgical techniques beyond what other races had. We don't know, but it fits their philosophy. Their material science went beyond metallurgy. They understood material properties deeply. They knew which materials to use for which applications. The choice of specific stones for structural support. The use of certain crystals for specific functions. This wasn't trial and error. They had systematic knowledge. As for the Sijic endeavor, some scholars think the Dwemer were pursuing this, which is the path to Kim. This involves understanding the nature of reality at the deepest level. Whether they achieved it, failed at it, or were even attempting it is debatable, but their philosophical texts suggest they were at least aware of these concepts. Their rejection of faith didn't make them less sophisticated. It made them approach problems differently. Where other races might pray or cast spells, the Dwemer would calculate, measure, and engineer solutions. Both approaches can be effective, but the Dwemer's approach led to technology that outlasted its creators by thousands of years. We've mentioned the Numidium several times, but let's really dig into this thing because it's one of the most important constructs in all of Elder Scrolls lore. The Numidium, called Numidium by some scholars, was Kagranak's masterpiece, a giant brass construct that would house the power of a god. It was never fully completed by the Dwemer before they disappeared, but the tribunal eventually figured out how to finish and activate it. Looking at the physical description, accounts of the Numidium's size vary wildly. Some say hundreds of feet tall, some say it could walk across mountains. When Tiber Septim used it to conquer Tamriel, witnesses described it as tall enough to reach the clouds. The brass tower of Alenor, one of the mythical towers that maintain reality, is associated with the Numidium, suggesting it's tower-sized in metaphysical terms. The construct was made entirely of brass and bronze-colored metal. It had a roughly humanoid shape with a head, torso, arms, and legs. But the proportions were wrong somehow, described as unsettling to look at. The craftsmanship was typical Dwemer, geometric and industrial, covered in pipes and mechanical details. As for the power source, it was originally intended to be powered by the heart of Lorkhan itself. Kagranak's plan was to use the three tools to channel the heart's divine energy into the Numidium. This would give it godlike power. When Tiber Septim obtained the Numidium from the tribunal, he powered it with the Mantella, a soul gem containing the soul of Zurin Arctus or Wolfheart, or both, depending on which account you believe. Later it was powered by other means. When it comes to abilities, the Numidium had reality warping powers. It could literally erase things from existence. The concept is called refusals. The Numidium would refuse the existence of something, and that thing would cease to be. It could walk through armies and simply refuse their existence, making thousands of soldiers vanish. Time behaves strangely around the Numidium. Its activation causes dragon breaks, which are moments where time fractures and multiple timelines become true simultaneously. The warp in the west at the end of Daggerfall was caused by the Numidium's activation. Multiple contradictory outcomes all happened at once. The purpose of the Numidium depends on who you ask. One theory says Kagranak wanted to elevate all Dwemer to godhood. The Numidium would be a vessel for their collective divinity. The entire race would transcend mortality together. Another theory says it was a weapon. The ultimate weapon that would make the Dwemer unchallengeable. They could conquer all of Tamriel, destroy the Chimer, and establish Dwemer dominance forever. A weirder theory suggests the Numidium was meant to break reality itself, to unmake the dream of the Godhead and free the Dwemer from existence. This gets into deep metaphysical stuff about Kim and the true nature of the Elder Scrolls universe. Maybe the Dwemer wanted to escape the cycle entirely. Looking at historical use, after the Dwemer disappeared, the Numidium sat inactive in Red Mountain for thousands of years. The tribunal studied it, which are Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotasil. Eventually, they figured out enough to complete it and make it functional, though they couldn't power it without the heart. As part of the treaty that ended the armistice with Tiber Septim, the tribunal gave him the Numidium. In exchange, Morrowind got to keep its religious practices and slavery laws. Tiber Septim's battle mage, Zurin Arctus, or maybe Wolfheart, or maybe both fused together because it's really complicated, had his soul trapped in the Mantella to power the device. Tiber Septim unleashed the Numidium on the Somerset Isles. The Altmer, despite being master mages and having sophisticated defenses, were crushed. The Numidium erased their resistance. The conquest took hours, not months. That's how powerful this thing was. After Tiber Septim died, the Numidium was lost. It resurfaced in the Iliac Bay region during the events of Daggerfall. Multiple factions were trying to control it. When it activated, it caused the warp in the west. Reality broke. 6 different outcomes all became true. The Numidium was destroyed in the process. Its physical form finally shattered. But here's the thing about the Numidium. Some texts suggest it exists outside of time. It was destroyed in 3E 417, but because of the dragon break, it also wasn't destroyed. Some scholars think it still exists in some form, or could be reconstructed, or never stopped existing in the first place. When we look at metaphysical significance, the Numidium is associated with NO. It represents denial, refusal, rejection. Where other towers represent creation or preservation, the brass tower represents negation. This fits the Dwemer philosophy perfectly, rejecting the gods, rejecting conventional wisdom, refusing to accept limitations. The Dwemer didn't succeed in activating it themselves, but in a way, maybe they did. Maybe when Khagrenats struck the heart, the Numidium did activate, and the entire Dwemer race was pulled into it, becoming part of the brass god. Maybe the Numidium that Tiber Septim used was powered by the souls of an entire civilization. We'll never know for sure, but the Numidium represents the pinnacle of Dwemer achievement and ambition, an attempt to create divinity through engineering and will rather than faith and worship. We touched on the Falmer earlier, but this deserves more attention because what the Dwemer did to the Snow Elves is one of the darkest chapters in Tamriel's history. The Snow Elves were native to Skyrim during the Merethic era. They had pale skin, white hair, and were naturally attuned to ice magic. Their civilization was sophisticated. They built cities, temples, and strongholds across Skyrim. They worshipped Auriel, the elven interpretation of Akatosh. Then humans arrived. Ysgramor and Atmorans came from the frozen continent to the north, seeking new lands. The two groups coexisted uneasily. Then came the Night of Tears. The circumstances are murky. The official Nord version says the Falmer attacked unprovoked, slaughtering the human settlement of Sarthal in a brutal night raid. Only Ysgramor and his two sons escaped. The Falmer version, what little we know of it, suggests they discovered something at Sarthal that threatened them, possibly the Eye of Magnus, a massively powerful artifact buried there. Maybe they feared what humans would do with such power. Whatever the truth, the result was genocide. Ysgramor returned with 500 companions and launched a war of extermination. The Nords hunted the Falmer relentlessly. The Snow Prince, the greatest Falmer warrior, made a last stand at the Battle of Moisring. He killed many Nords before falling to a 12-year-old girl named Finna, who threw a spear in revenge for her fallen mother. With their greatest hero dead, Falmer resistance collapsed. Their cities fell, their population was decimated. Survivors fled underground, seeking refuge anywhere they could find it. The Dwemer saw an opportunity. They offered sanctuary to the remaining Falmer. Desperate and dying, the Snow Elves accepted. The Dwemer demanded a price. The Falmer had to consume fungi that grew in the depths, specifically toxic fungi that would blind them. Why? Control. The Dwemer wanted servants, not refugees. Blind servants who depended entirely on their Dwemer masters. The fungi permanently altered the Snow Elves' biology, ensuring all future generations would be born blind. At first, the Falmer were probably just servants, doing labor in the depths, working in the darkness, dependent on Dwemer goodwill for survival. But over time, it got worse. Archaeological evidence suggests torture chambers in Dwemer holdings. The Dwemer didn't just enslave the Falmer, they brutalized them. Generations passed, living underground, blind, enslaved, eating nothing but toxic mushrooms. The Falmer changed. Their skin became pale and twisted. They hunched over from years of cramped conditions. They lost their culture, their language, their entire civilization. They became feral. The transformation took centuries, but the result was the creatures we see in Skyrim, the Betrayed. Savage, aggressive, living in primitive tribes in the ruins of Dwemer cities and natural caves. They attack anything that enters their territory. They've developed a strange relationship with the Crostids, those insect creatures you find in their lairs. But they're not mindless. The Falmer build structures, use tools, and create armor and weapons from chitin. They have some form of social organization with leaders and roles. They can tame and ride Chaurus. They've adapted to blindness using echolocation or other senses. In their own twisted way, they've survived. And here's the kicker. They're slowly evolving back. Some Falmer found in the later areas have slightly better posture, slightly more sophistication. Given another few thousand years, maybe they could recover some of what was lost, but they'll never be the Snow Elves again. That culture is gone forever. In the Dawnguard DLC, you meet Knight Paladin Gelebor and his brother Arch-Curate Werther in the Forgotten Vale. They're the last two uncorrupted Snow Elves, frozen in time in a hidden chantry of Ariel. Gelebor is friendly and sad, mourning the loss of his people. Werther went insane and started the Tyranny of the Sun prophecy to destroy the sun out of bitterness and rage. Gelebor tells you the Snow Elf side of the story. He confirms that Dwemer betrayed his people. He calls the blinded Falmer the betrayed and mourns what they've become. Meeting him is one of the most poignant moments in Skyrim, because you're talking to someone whose entire race was destroyed. The Falmer aren't just enemies in a dungeon. They're a tragedy. They're what happens when one civilization completely dominates and destroys another. The Dwemer did this, intentionally, systematically, for generations. When the Dwemer disappeared, the Falmer were suddenly free, but by then they were too far gone. They inherited the Dwemer ruins, but had no understanding of what they were. They live in the remains of their oppressor's civilization, unable to comprehend the machines around them. There's a horrible irony here. The Dwemer wanted to achieve godhood, to transcend mortality, to leave some kind of legacy. Instead, their legacy is empty ruins populated by the broken remains of a people they destroyed. The Falmer skulking in the darkness are the Dwemer's true monument. Not all Dwemer agreed with the direction their civilization was heading. The Rourken clan represents the biggest split in Dwemer society. When the Dwemer and Chimer formed the first council, not everyone was happy about it. The Rourken clan opposed the alliance. They saw it as a betrayal of Dwemer principles. Cooperating with religious fanatics like the Chimer went against everything they believed in. The clan's leader, some sources call him Rourken, others Chief Rourken, decided they would leave rather than be part of this. According to legend, he brought his hammer, Volendrung, to a high mountain and threw it as far as he could westward. Wherever it landed, that's where they would settle. The hammer flew across all of Morrowind and Skyrim, clear across the Geralt Mountains, and landed in what's now Hammerfell. The Rourken clan followed, a long exodus from their homeland. When they found the hammer, they settled there and built new cities. The main Rourken settlement in Hammerfell was called Volenfell, literally City of the Hammer. They built other cities too, Bethsark, Mzopthar, and others. These Hammerfell Dwemer were isolated from their cousins back in Morrowind and Skyrim. This isolation meant they weren't there when Khagrunak did his thing with the heart, but they disappeared anyway. Whatever happened to the Dwemer affected the entire race simultaneously, regardless of location. The Rourken clan vanishing proves the disappearance wasn't localized to Red Mountain. It was universal. Their ruins in Hammerfell have their own character. The architecture is similar but adapted to the desert environment. The Redguards eventually conquered these settlements and built their own culture on top of the Dwemer foundations. Volenfell itself shows up in Elder Scrolls Online. It's a dungeon where you can explore the Rourken clan's main city. The place is overrun with Dwarven automatons and treasures hunters. The architecture is impressive. Grand halls, sophisticated mechanisms, all the standard Dwemer features. The Rourken split is interesting because it shows the Dwemer weren't monolithic. They had internal politics and disagreements. Some clans valued isolation above all else. The Rourken couldn't stomach allying with the Chimer, even temporarily, even for mutual benefit. Were they right? If they'd stayed, they'd have vanished anyway. By leaving, they at least got to build something new for a while, though, in the end, it didn't matter. The hammer Volendrung became a Daedric artifact of Malakath, the only lasting remnant of the Rourken clan besides their ruins. Let's talk about this war properly, because it's central to the Dwemer story. The first council was formed sometime in the Merethic era, or very early First Era. King Dumak, Dwarf King, and Indoril Nerevar, the Hortator of the Chimer, swore oaths of friendship and alliance. For centuries, this held. The Dwemer and Chimer weren't friends exactly, but they weren't actively killing each other, which was an improvement. Then Vorin Dagoth discovered the heart of Lorkhan beneath Red Mountain. He also discovered that the Dwemer, specifically Chief Tonal Architect Kagrenak, were building a massive construct to tap into the heart's power. This was the Numidium project. Vorin reported this to Nerevar. Nerevar was horrified. To the Chimer, the heart was sacred. To the Chimer's patron, Daedric Prince Azura, mortals messing with the heart was blasphemy of the highest order. Nerevar consulted with Azura, who confirmed this was very bad and would end in disaster. Nerevar confronted Dumak. He demanded the Dwemer stop their work on the heart. According to various accounts, Dumak claimed he knew nothing about the project. This might be true. Kagrenak might have been working in secret, or Dumak knew but couldn't or wouldn't stop Kagrenak. The chief tonal architect had too much support among other Dwemer, or maybe Dumak was fully on board with the plan and refused Nerevar's demands. We don't know which version is true. Maybe all of them are true simultaneously thanks to Dragon Break nonsense. What we know is that negotiations failed, war broke out, the First Council shattered, the Dwemer and Chimer went from uneasy allies to bitter enemies. The war lasted years. The Chimer had numbers and religious fervor. The Dwemer had superior technology and defensive positions, deep underground. Neither side could land a decisive blow. The Nord King Wulfharth got involved on the Chimer side. He hated the Dwemer for trying to conquer Skyrim in earlier centuries. So you had Nerevar, the Chimer hero, alongside Wulfharth, the Ash King of Skyrim, fighting against the entire Dwemer civilization. The Battle of Red Mountain was the climax. Multiple conflicting accounts exist of what happened, which scholars attribute to a dragon break where reality fractured during this event. In the version from the 36 Lessons, which is Vivek's account, Vivek, Almalexia, Sotasil, and Nerevar fought their way to the heart chamber. They killed Dumak. Nerevar killed Dumak personally. Then Kagrenak used the tools on the heart, and the Dwemer vanished. Another account called Nerevar at Red Mountain tells a similar story but emphasizes Nerevar's role more. The Chimer and Nords were winning. The Dwemer were desperate. Kagrenak struck the heart in a last-ditch attempt to activate the Numidium and turn the tide. Instead, his entire race disappeared. The Nordic version from the 7 fights of the Aldudaga says Wulfharth was the real hero. He and his tongues shouted the Dwemer to death. Nerevar died during the battle and was just a corpse being puppeted by magic when he killed Dumak. Wulfharth himself was also technically dead, having been resurrected multiple times. There's also the Arcturian heresy, which is a controversial account that says Tiber Septim's soul was there somehow, bound to either Wulfharth or Zurin Arctus or both. 3 souls became one entity, called the Underking. This version is weird and contradicts itself constantly. Whatever the exact sequence, the result was clear. Dumak died, Nerevar was wounded, the Dwemer vanished. The war ended instantly because one side no longer existed. Nerevar made his council, Vivek, Almalexia, Sotasil, and Vorin Dagoth, swear never to use the tools on the heart. Then he died from his wounds. Or he was murdered by the tribunal, or both. Dragon breaks make history messy. The tribunal eventually broke their oath and used the tools to achieve godhood, becoming the 3 living gods of Morrowind. Vorin Dagoth, later known as Dagoth-Ur, became corrupted by the heart and was driven mad. But all of that is post-Dwemer history. The important part for our purposes is that the War of the First Council ended with the Dwemer's complete disappearance, leaving behind only their ruins, their machines, and the mystery of where they went. What did the Dwemer actually do day to day? How did they live? Based on archaeological evidence and the few surviving texts, we can piece together some aspects of Dwemer culture. When it comes to food and drink, they had to eat something. Dwemer ruins contain evidence of kitchens and food storage areas. Living underground limited their options. They probably grew fungi farms in the deep caverns, similar to what the Falmer were forced to eat, though presumably less toxic varieties. They might have kept underground fish farms in the water systems. Some ruins show evidence of livestock pens, though what animals could survive underground is questionable. Trade with surface dwellers would have supplemented their diet. The Dwemer weren't completely isolated, they interacted with other races when necessary. They probably imported food from the surface in exchange for their manufactured goods and artifacts. We don't have great information on clothing. The brief glimpse of the Dwemer ghost in Morrowind shows robes. Practical, probably. No reason for fancy clothes when you live in functional underground cities. Their torques and tonal attenuators would have been standard equipment for anyone working with tonal architecture. As for family structure, no clue. We don't know if they had traditional family units, communal child rearing, or something else entirely. We know clans were important, like the Rourken clan, the Kragan clan, and others. Whether these were family-based clans or more like guilds or political factions is unclear. Did the Dwemer have fun? They must have had some form of recreation. Maybe intellectual pursuits like mathematics, philosophy, debates about tonal theory, board games using geometric logic, musical instruments that played specific frequencies. Given their personality, their idea of fun was probably studying something. They didn't worship gods, but they had philosophical frameworks. The study of Kagrinak's theories was almost religious in its importance. They had places dedicated to contemplating their relationship with the gods they rejected and the heart of Lorkhan they studied. This wasn't worship, but it was reverence of a sort, reverence for knowledge and understanding. Dwemer art is geometric and functional. Their architecture serves purpose first, aesthetics second, but there's beauty in that functionality. The intricate patterns on their metalwork, the precise symmetry of their designs. They created beauty through mathematics and engineering rather than through emotion or expression. We find Dwemer urns in their ruins, so they cremated their dead. The urns are stored in specific areas, suggesting organized cemeteries or memorial sections. What rituals accompanied cremation, if any, we don't know. Given their atheism, probably no prayers to gods, maybe speeches about the deceased's accomplishments and contributions to Dwemer knowledge. The Dwemer clearly had sophisticated education systems. You don't develop tonal architecture without training new generations in its principles. They had libraries like Kagrinak's library. They wrote instructional texts. Knowledge was passed down through formal education, not just apprenticeship. Young Dwemer probably learned mathematics, engineering, metallurgy, and tonal theory from a young age. The most talented would become tonal architects. Others would become craftsmen, engineers, or workers. The rigid hierarchy suggests a structured education system that identified and developed talent. Different Dwemer city-states maintained contact. They traded goods and knowledge. They coordinated during emergencies like Nord invasions. They formed alliances like the one during the Ethereum Wars. This suggests some form of long-distance communication system. Maybe they used sending stones, which are magical artifacts that allow instant communication. Maybe they had mechanical telegraph systems using their pipe networks to send coded sounds. Maybe tonal architects could communicate through harmonic frequencies broadcast through the stone itself. We don't know, but they definitely had ways to stay in touch. Their society was clearly stratified. At the top were the kings and clan leaders. Below them were the tonal architects and master craftsmen. Then regular citizens like engineers, workers, and craftsmen. At the bottom were slaves, primarily the Falmer in Skyrim holdings. Your position in society probably depended on your skills and knowledge. The Dwemer valued intelligence and ability over birth, though clan membership surely mattered too. This is speculation, but it fits their rationalist philosophy better than a strict hereditary system. ESO has added significant amounts of Dwemer content since its launch, so let's cover what the game has shown us about them. The Markarth chapter focused heavily on Dwemer ruins in the Reach region. You explore places like Beitharzel, which is also known as Deep Folk Crossing, and it was involved in the Ethereum Wars. The story involves Lady Belaine trying to harness Dwemer technology and Ethereum for her own purposes. You learn more about the Dwarven architectons, which are automatons specifically imbued with Ethereum crystals that make them even more dangerous. There's also a part of Blackreach called Greymoor Caverns. This is a different section of Blackreach than what we see in Skyrim, but it's the same massive underground cavern network. In ESO, you can explore it during the Second Era, when it's somewhat less overrun by Falmer. The place is still full of automatons, ancient Dwemer structures, and valuable resources. The visual design is stunning, with the glowing mushrooms, the Dwemer ruins integrated into natural caverns, and the sense of scale. Then there's the Clockwork City. Okay, this isn't technically Dwemer, but it's related. Sotasil, one of the tribunal gods, created an entire artificial realm called the Clockwork City, using principles he learned from studying Dwemer technology. The whole place is mechanical, with brass and bronze everywhere, gears and pipes, automatons called factotums patrolling. It's like Sotasil asked, what if we made an entire world using Dwemer engineering? The result is fascinating and shows how influential Dwemer technology was on the tribunal. The museum in Markarth that we see in Skyrim, which is called Nchonzel, also appears in ESO during the Second Era. It's still an active research site. You meet scholars studying Dwemer artifacts. The place is less organized than in Skyrim's time, more like an active dig site than a proper museum. Excavations are still underway. Several ruins that appear in Skyrim also show up in ESO, places like Arkenthams, Bathardams, Mzulft, and Ralpthar. Seeing them in the Second Era versus the Fourth Era is interesting. They're in better condition, though still ancient. The automatons are just as active. The structures are mostly the same, showing how well Dwemer construction holds up over time. In Vrothgar, the Rourken clan's history gets explored. You learn about their split from the main Dwemer civilization. You explore ruins associated with the clan. You learn about Volendrunk's significance to the Rourken. It's good lore expansion on a part of Dwemer history that was previously just hinted at. ESO's Morrowind expansion lets you explore Vardenfell before Red Mountain erupts. Several Dwemer ruins appear. Nchuleftingth is a major one where you deal with Dwemer constructs and treasure hunters. Seeing these ruins in the Second Era, about 700 years after the Dwemer disappeared, but still relatively recently abandoned compared to the Fourth Era, is interesting. Dwemer ruins pop up across multiple ESO zones. Each one has automatons, treasure, and usually some quest associated with it. The consistency in design across all these ruins reinforces how unified Dwemer architecture was, despite different clans and regions. There's this Altmer scholar named Naramo who appears in multiple DLCs studying Dwemer ruins. He's obsessed with their technology and has managed to reprogram some automatons. He's one of the few modern characters who's had any success in actually understanding and working with Dwemer technology rather than just looting it. Following his research across different zones gives you a tour of Dwemer sites and innovations. Sotha Sil also created these artificial beings called fabricants using principles derived from studying Dwemer animunculi. They're not exactly the same because factotums are more humanoid and sophisticated than Dwemer spiders or spheres, but the influence is obvious. Sodasil took Dwemer concepts and advanced them with his divine power. ESO has been good for Dwemer lore because it shows us their ruins during different time periods and in different regions. The consistency is impressive. Whether you're in Skyrim, Morrowind, or Hammerfell, Dwemer ruins have that same aesthetic and feel. The automatons work the same way. The architecture follows the same principles. This suggests the Dwemer had strong cultural unity, despite their independent city-states. We keep mentioning the heart, so let's explain what this thing actually was and why the Dwemer wanted it so badly. Lorkhan was the trickster god who convinced or tricked the other Aedra into creating the mortal world, Mundus. This required the Aedra to sacrifice much of their divine power. They were pissed. Led by Trinimac, who later became Malakath, they killed Lorkhan, ripped out his heart, and threw it across the world. The heart landed in what would become Red Mountain in Morrowind, creating the volcano from the impact. It was buried deep underground, still beating, still pulsing with divine power. The Aedra couldn't destroy it. You can't destroy a god's heart, apparently, so they just hoped it would stay buried forever. But the heart wasn't just any divine artifact. Lorkhan was the god associated with mortality, change, and the mortal plane itself. His heart was the heart of the world, in a very literal sense. It contained the power of creation, the fundamental divine energy that had made Mundus possible. The Chimer discovered the heart first, recognizing it for what it was. To them, it was sacred, a god's literal heart, still beating after eons. Something to be revered, maybe worshipped, definitely not touched. The Dwemer also discovered it, probably around the same time or shortly after, but their reaction was totally different. They saw a power source. They saw an opportunity. They saw something they could study, understand, and use. Kagrenak theorized that with the right tools and the right application of tonal architecture, they could tap into the heart's power safely. Not just step into it, channel it, direct it, use it to achieve their goals. The heart could power the Numidium. The heart could elevate the entire Dwemer race to divinity. The heart could make them equals or superiors to the gods they rejected. So Kagrenak forged his tools, Wraithguard to protect the user, Sunder to strike the heart and release its power, Keening to focus and direct that power. These weren't just magical artifacts, they were precisely calibrated instruments designed to interact with divine energies at specific frequencies. The plan was sound in theory. Kagrenak was brilliant, his calculations were precise, his tools were masterworks, but there are some forces you maybe shouldn't mess with. The heart of a dead god who created mortality itself might be one of them. When Kagrenak struck the heart during the Battle of Red Mountain, something went wrong. Or maybe it went exactly as planned, depending on your theory. Either way, every Dwemer across Tamriel vanished instantly. After the Dwemer disappeared, the Tribunal, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotasil eventually used the tools themselves. They figured out how to safely tap into the heart's power, though it took them years of study. They became living gods, sustained by regular pilgrimages to Red Mountain where they would use the tools to refresh their divinity. This worked for thousands of years until the Nerevarine, the player in Morrowind, came along. Following prophecy, the Nerevarine took the tools and severed the Tribunal's connection to the heart, ending their godhood. Then, the Nerevarine destroyed the heart itself, or rather, destroyed the enchantments binding it to the physical world, causing it to return to whatever divine realm it came from. With the heart gone, Red Mountain erupted catastrophically years later, devastating Vardenfell. The physical anchor that had connected Lorkhan's divine power to Mundus was gone, and the volcano no longer had that supernatural stabilization. So, the heart of Lorkhan was the focal point of the entire Dwemer story. Their discovery of it led to the War of the First Council. Their attempt to use it led to their disappearance. Its continued presence allowed the Tribunal to become gods. Its eventual removal led to disaster for Morrowind. One artifact, countless consequences. Let's talk about the specific Dwemer individuals we know about, though there aren't many. Kagrenak was the chief tonal architect, basically the architect of the Dwemer's disappearance. Brilliant, ambitious, and possibly insane. He believed the Dwemer could achieve divinity through understanding and manipulating the fundamental tones of reality. He wrote Divine Metaphysics, which outlined his theories. He created Wraithguard, Sunder, and Keening. He designed the Numidium. And when he struck the heart of Lorkhan with his tools, he erased his entire race from existence. Whether intentionally or accidentally, we'll never know. What kind of person was Kagrenak? We can only guess from his works. Driven, certainly. Willing to take enormous risks. Confident in his understanding of forces beyond mortal comprehension. Possibly unconcerned with ethics or consequences if it meant achieving his goals. He saw the gods as puzzles to solve and mortality as a problem to fix. King Dumak, also called Dwarf King, was the Dwemer king who formed the first council with Nerevar. He's presented as honorable in most accounts. He befriended Nerevar genuinely. He wanted peace between Dwemer and Chimer. Whether he knew about Kagranak's project with the heart is disputed. Some accounts say he was ignorant and horrified when Nerevar confronted him. Others say he knew and supported it. He died during the Battle of Red Mountain, killed in combat. We've discussed Yagrum Bagarn extensively, the last living Dwemer, who survived only because he was traveling in an outer realm when his race disappeared. Master Crafter, who worked for Kagranak, now a bloated corpus victim living beneath Telfire, helping Devyth Fire with research while mourning his lost civilization. There was a Dwemer named Bituand Mzanj who wrote warnings about Kagranak's plans. He argued that manipulating the heart was too dangerous, that the risks were too great. His texts suggest internal opposition to the Numidium project. He was clearly ignored. Chief Rourken was the leader of the Rourken clan, who threw Volendrung across Tamriel and led his people into exile rather than stay for the First Council, a staunch isolationist who valued Dwemer independence above all. His choice meant the Rourken clan left Morrowind entirely, though they disappeared anyway when Kagranach acted. There was a Dwemer engineer named Radak who wrote Hanging Gardens, a book that details some Dwemer projects and philosophy. The book is more of a metaphysical treatise than a gardening guide, discussing Dwemer approaches to creation and construction. Then there's Marobar Sul, who is possibly not a real Dwemer, but a fake. Multiple books are attributed to this name, but scholars think Marobar Sul is a pseudonym used by an elf from a different era who wrote forged Dwemer texts. The controversy around authenticity shows how little we truly know about Dwemer writing and how easy it is to fake. That's basically it for name Dwemer. We have references to other clan leaders, craftsmen, and architects, but no detailed information about them as individuals. The Dwemer kept records, but most are in untranslated Dwemeris or have degraded over millennia. This scarcity of personal information makes them more mysterious. We know what they built and what they believed, but not who they were as people. We see the monuments, but not the individual hands that carved them. Maybe that's fitting. The Dwemer valued their civilization and achievements over individual identity. The Dwarven metal alloy is one of the biggest mysteries, because we just can't recreate it. Let's talk about what makes it special and why modern smiths can't forge new batches. When it comes to composition, we don't know the exact metals involved. Analysis shows it's an alloy containing iron, steel, and other elements in specific proportions. Some alchemists think it contains malachite or meteoric iron. Others think there are rare elements we don't have names for. The problem is that even when smiths try to replicate the proportions, the result isn't the same. The forging process might be the key. The Dwemer might have used specific temperatures, cooling rates, or hammering techniques that we haven't figured out. They probably had custom-built forges that could reach temperatures normal forges can't. Or maybe they used tonal architecture during the forging process, using specific sound frequencies to alter the metal's structure at a molecular level. Some scholars think there was alchemical treatment involved. The metal was treated alchemically after forging, bathed in specific solutions, exposed to certain magical energies, or subjected to processes we don't understand. The result is metal that doesn't rust, doesn't corrode, and maintains its properties indefinitely. Maybe there's a persistent enchantment woven into the metal itself. Not a spell placed on finished items, but magic embedded during the forging process. This would explain why Dwarven metal resists degradation, because it's magically protected at a fundamental level. Another theory says the Dwemer discovered a rare ore or learned to extract specific elements that we simply don't have access to anymore. Maybe the mines they used are tapped out or buried under mountain collapse. Maybe the ore came from somewhere we haven't found. Without the source material, we can't make more. Here's a wild one called the brass god theory. What if Dwarven metal isn't actually metal in the traditional sense? What if it's some kind of solidified divine essence, matter transformed through tonal architecture into a physical form that resembles bronze but is actually something else? The Numidium was called the brass god, so maybe brass here doesn't mean the alloy we think it means. Modern smiths can melt down Dwarven scrap and reforge it into new shapes. You can make Dwarven armor and weapons from salvaged materials. But you are not creating new Dwarven metal, you are just recycling what already exists. The supply is fixed. There's only however much the Dwemer left behind, and every piece that gets lost or destroyed means less total Dwarven metal in the world. This makes Dwarven artifacts increasingly valuable. In-universe, there's probably a thriving market for Dwemer scrap. Every bent gear and broken pipe can be melted down and reused. Entire businesses are built around exploring Dwemer ruins, salvaging metal, and selling it to smiths. It's basically mining, except the mine is 4,000 years old and full of hostile robots. Calcelmo and other researchers probably get frustrated watching people melt down potentially significant artifacts to make swords. Every item has archaeological value, but economic pressures mean most of it gets recycled. The knowledge potentially contained in a unique device is lost forever when it gets tossed in a smelter. The Dwemer probably didn't intend for their metalwork to become rare treasure. To them, it was just building material. Imagine if our descendants, 4,000 years from now, are salvaging our steel because they can't figure out how to make more. That's basically what's happening with Dwarven metal. Now, let's really get into what tonal architecture was and how it supposedly worked, because it's central to understanding the Dwemer. The basic concept is that reality has underlying tones or frequencies. Everything that exists vibrates at specific frequencies. The Aedra created Mundus through a process that can be understood as song or sound. Therefore, if you can understand and reproduce those fundamental frequencies, you can manipulate reality itself. This isn't magic in the traditional sense. Magic in Tamriel draws on Aetherius, manipulates magicka, and follows certain rules. Tonal architecture is different because it's manipulating the fabric of existence itself by producing precisely calibrated sounds. Think of reality as a massive musical instrument. If you know the right notes and play them at the right frequencies, you can make the instrument do things. The Dwemer weren't casting spells, they were playing reality like an instrument. In Elder Scrolls cosmology, the Earthbones are Aedra who gave up their consciousness to become the laws of nature. Gravity, time, the physics of the mortal world, these are all Earthbones. The Dwemer believed that by understanding the tones associated with different Earthbones, they could interact with or even override natural laws. Think about Y'ffre, the first Earthbone, who set the laws of shape and form in Tamriel. The Dwemer studied how the Elnafey controlled these natural laws. They observed, they calculated, and they figured out how to replicate those effects through sound. For practical applications, the Dwemer used tonal architecture for everything. Mining operations where sound waves could shatter specific rock layers without damaging surrounding stone. Medical procedures where precise frequencies could affect biological tissue. Construction where tonal resonance could shape and move massive stone blocks. The psychological applications were particularly scary. Ancient Chimer texts claim the Dwemer could use tonal forces for mind control, basically oral hypnosis, broadcasting specific frequencies that would make people suggestible, compliant, obedient. They used this on the Falmer to keep them enslaved. The fact that entire populations of snow elves remained subjugated for generations suggests this wasn't just crude brainwashing, but sophisticated mental manipulation. Some scholars think the Dwemer had a form of telepathy among themselves called the calling. It might have been a shared consciousness facilitated by everyone being tuned to the same harmonic frequency. This would explain how city-states separated by hundreds of miles could coordinate so effectively. It would also explain why all Dwemer vanished simultaneously, because if they were all harmonically linked, whatever happened to one happened to all. Dwemer tonal architects wore special equipment, torques around their necks that amplified their voices, tonal attenuators, which was protective headgear to shield their ears and brains from harmonic feedback. Without protection, the frequencies they were producing could drive them mad or kill them. They built massive devices called tonal resonators. These were architectural constructs with huge chambers filled with pipes, dials, pistons, and resonating surfaces. Some were described as taller than giants. The complexity was staggering. Modern scholars, looking at the remains, can't figure out half of what these devices did. The oculary in Mzulft is a good example of sophisticated Dwemer engineering. It's not purely tonal architecture, but it combines astronomical calculation with focusing crystals and scanning beams. The precision required to make that device work shows the level of understanding they had. When it comes to Khagranak's breakthrough, when the Dwemer discovered the heart of Lorkhan, Khagranak realized he'd found the ultimate tonal source. Lorkhan's name in Aldmeris literally means doom drum. His heart was the drum, the fundamental beat that all of Mundus danced to. If you could interact with that beat directly, you could reshape all of reality. So Khagranak forged his three tools with tonal architecture principles embedded in their very structure. Thunder was designed to strike the heart and produce specific volumes and qualities of power. Keening was crafted to flay and focus that power, and Wraithguard protected the user from being destroyed by those divine energies. According to one theory, Keening was made from the sound of the shadow of the moons, which is a poetic way of describing something forged from tonal principles related to Lorkhan's remnants. The tools weren't just magical artifacts. They were instruments designed to play specific notes in the song of reality, with the heart as their soundboard. What went wrong, or what went right, depending on your theory, happened when Khagranak struck the heart during the Battle of Red Mountain. He was attempting to create a massive transformation in the Dwemer's nature, elevate them beyond mortality, push them into a higher state of existence. The problem with messing with divine tones is that one wrong frequency, one miscalculation, one unexpected interference, and you're not getting the results you wanted. Some scholars think Khagranak's work was sabotaged, either by Nerevar interfering with the tools, or by Azura herself adding an element of static change that trapped the Dwemer between Mundus and wherever they were trying to go. Others think Khagranak just screwed up. Tonal architecture is precise. You're not casting a spell where close enough works. You're manipulating the fundamental frequencies of existence. Being off by a fraction could turn transcendence into annihilation. Very few people understand tonal architecture today. Soltasil, one of the tribunal gods, studied it extensively and incorporated Dwemer principles into his clockwork city. But even with divine intellect, he couldn't replicate everything the Dwemer did. Arniel Gain, a researcher in Skyrim, tried to replicate Khagranak's experiment on a smaller scale using a warped soul gem instead of the heart. He vanished too, just like the Dwemer. Whatever Khagranak did, it's reproducible, and just as catastrophic. The tomb used by Nords is related to tonal architecture. Both involve using sound to alter reality. But the tomb is more instinctive, less calculated. Dwemer tonal architecture was mathematical and precise. Both approaches work, but they come from totally different philosophical frameworks. The Dwemer left behind a bunch of books, so let's talk about the important ones. There's a book called Divine Metaphysics written by Khagranak himself, and this is the big one. It's his treatise on his theories about the heart of Lorkhan and how to use it. The book is in Dwemeris, and even translated portions are nearly incomprehensible without deep understanding of tonal architecture and Dwemer philosophy. Yagrum Bagarn has read it and refuses to share its contents with anyone, believing Khagranak's theories should die with the Dwemer. Another important one is The Egg of Time, which was written by Betuant Mzanch. This is a Dwemer text warning against using the heart. Buhuant argued the risks were too great, that Khagranak was playing with forces beyond their control. He was right, apparently, though nobody listened to him. You can find two books in Dwemer ruins in Morrowind, called Khagranak's Journal and Plan Book. They contain technical details about the construction of Wraithguard and how to attune it to a user. Yagrum Bagarn needs these books to activate Wraithguard if you kill Vivek and go the backpath route in Morrowind's main quest. There's also Hanging Gardens, which is supposedly about the hanging gardens of Waste and Corridale, but is actually a philosophical treatise on Dwemer approaches to creation and construction. Written in both Dwemeris and Aldmeris, which is unusual. The Antediluvian Peaks, supposedly written by Marobarsul, is probably a fake. Marobarsul is thought to be a pseudonym used by someone writing fake Dwemer texts centuries after they disappeared. This book claims to be a Dwemer account of places and events, but scholars are skeptical. Another questionable text is in Chunak's Fire and Faith, supposedly in Chunak's account of his journey among the Dwemer and attempts to understand Kagrenac's teachings. Again, possibly a forgery. The authenticity of many Dwemer texts is questionable. Ruins of Kemelze was written by an archaeologist named Roland Nordsen, and it's his account of exploring Dwemer ruins. This is definitely written by a non-Dwemer, since it's describing the ruins as ancient and mysterious, still useful for understanding what outsiders find when they explore Dwemer sites. One of the more valuable texts is called Secrets of Dwemer Animunculai, which is a technical document with diagrams of sphere centurions in various stages of construction, shows internal mechanisms, power systems, and construction techniques. Then there's Dwemer History and Culture, written by a modern scholar named Hasfat Antibalis. It's an overview of what's known about the Dwemer, useful as a summary but doesn't contain any groundbreaking revelations. The Ethereum Wars, written by Tarendreth, gives accounts of the conflict between the four Dwemer city-states over control of Ethereum and the Ethereum Forge. Based on research originally done by Katria before Dreth stole her work and published it under his own name, gives details about Arkenthams, Ralbthar, Mzulft, and Beitherzel. A Guide to Dwemer Megastructures is another book that discusses tonal resonators and other massive Dwemer constructions, explains how the Dwemer used sound for various purposes, including psychological manipulation. Gilan's Architecture, written by Gilan Marili, is an outdated summary of Dwemer architectural principles, historical rather than cutting edge, but shows how understanding of Dwemer construction has evolved. There are multiple volumes called Dwemer Inquiries that discuss various aspects of Dwemer culture, society, architecture, and disappearance. Contains translations of Dwemer's text fragments and speculation about Dwemer city planning. The Five Songs of King Wulfharth is a Nordic oral tradition that references the profane tools and describes keening in poetic terms. Not a Dwemer text, but provides an outside perspective on Kagrenac's tools. You'll also find various Dwemer schematics scattered around, which are technical documents and diagrams found in ruins. Most are untranslated or partially degraded. They show blueprints for automatons, architectural features, and mechanisms. These are invaluable to researchers, but hard to interpret without understanding Dwemer's technical terminology. The frustrating thing about Dwemer texts is that most of the really interesting ones are in untranslated Dwemeris, or are so technical that even translated they're incomprehensible. The books available to modern readers give us glimpses of Dwemer thought, but the full picture remains elusive. Books about the Dwemer written by modern scholars often contradict each other. This is what happens when you're trying to understand a civilization that vanished 4,000 years ago and left behind mostly ruins and machines. Everyone's interpreting the same evidence differently. Alright, so why should we care about the Dwemer? They disappeared 4,000 years ago. Why do they still matter? Because their fingerprints are all over Tamrielic history. The Numidium alone shaped the course of the Second and Third Eras. Tiber Septim used it to conquer Tamriel and establish the Third Empire. The device caused the warp in the west, a dragon break that simultaneously made 6 different outcomes true and reshaped the political landscape of the Iliac Bay region. The city of Markarth is built into a Dwemer ruin and still uses Dwemer infrastructure. The water systems work, the mechanisms function. 4,000 years later, and the city relies on Dwemer engineering daily. The tribunal gods base their divinity on Kagrenac's work. They use his tools and his techniques to tap into the heart's power. The entire religious and political structure of Morrowind for thousands of years was built on repurposed Dwemer technology. Every major faction wants Dwemer artifacts. The Thieves Guild gets hired to steal Calcelmo's translation guide. The Dawn Guard wants you to explore Dwemer ruins for equipment. The College of Winterhold studies Dwemer magical theory. Everyone recognizes that Dwemer knowledge is valuable. Modern technology in Tamriel can't match what the Dwemer achieved. We're still trying to understand their work. The best researchers devote their entire lives to studying one aspect of Dwemer culture, and they die without figuring it all out. The Dwemer proved that atheism and science could compete with faith and magic. Every other civilization in Tamriel incorporates worship of gods or Daedra into their worldview. The Dwemer said no to all of that and built a civilization that rivaled or surpassed everyone else's achievements. That's philosophically significant. Their disappearance is a warning. Here was the most advanced civilization in Tamriel's history, and they vanished in an instant through their own hubris. They thought they could become gods. They thought they understood forces beyond mortal comprehension. They were wrong, or they succeeded in a way they didn't expect, or something else happened. But the result is that they're gone. The Falmer are another warning. The Dwemer showed what one race can do to another when power is completely one-sided. They didn't just conquer the Snow Elves. They destroyed them on a genetic level across generations. The twisted, feral Falmer in Skyrim's dungeons are the Dwemer's legacy, and it's a horrifying one. Every adventurer who explores Dwemer ruins is walking through the corpse of a civilization. The machines still run, the lights still glow, steam still hisses through pipes, but nobody's home. It's like finding a house where dinner's still on the table, but everyone vanished mid-meal. Eerie doesn't begin to cover it. The Dwemer matter because they're the biggest unsolved mystery in Elder Scrolls lore. Bethesda has kept this mystery alive through multiple games over decades. Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, ESO. Every game adds pieces but never completes the puzzle. That's intentional. Some mysteries are better left mysterious. Let's talk about the gameplay experience for a bit, because exploring Dwemer ruins is different from other dungeons. First off, the aesthetic is unique. Most dungeons in Elder Scrolls games are caves, tombs, or forts. Dwemer ruins are industrial, metal everywhere, pipes and gears, steam venting from valves. The lighting has this bronze-yellow tone from the still-functioning Dwemer mechanisms. Everything looks manufactured rather than natural. The sound design reinforces this. You hear machinery, distant clanking, steam hissing, gears turning, metal footsteps when spheres and spiders patrol. It's not quiet like a tomb or echoey like a cave. It sounds like a factory that never shut down. The enemies are all mechanical. No bandits, no drower, no skeevers, just automatons. Spiders come in swarms, spheres unfold from dormant balls and roll at you. Centurions lumber out of alcoves and start swinging. The Falmer show up in some ruins, adding a biological threat to the mechanical ones, and that combination can be nasty. Fighting automatons requires different tactics than fighting organic enemies. They're resistant to most damage types except shock. They can't be soul-trapped or reanimated. Stealth is harder because they have different detection methods. Invisibility alone won't save you. They can still detect you through other means. The architecture is maze-like. Dwemer cities were multi-level complexes with connecting corridors, large chambers, and vertical shafts. You're constantly going up and down ramps, across bridges, through doorways. Getting lost is easy. Some ruins have multiple entrances and exits through different elevator systems. The loot is different too. Instead of gold and weapons, you're finding Dwemer metal. Gears, cogs, plates, struts. All of it weighs a ton, but can be smelted into valuable ingots. There's this constant calculation. Is this piece of scrap worth the wait? Do I leave it and come back? Do I take it now and get over-encumbered? You find Dwemer artifacts scattered around. Strange devices whose purposes are unclear. Lexicons, coherers, convectors. Books in Dwemeris that you can't read. Diagrams and schematics. All of it hints at sophisticated purposes you don't fully understand. Some ruins have puzzles. Tonal locks where you need to hit resonators in the right sequence, mechanisms that require specific items to activate. The Ethereum quest has you reassembling shards and using them to access a hidden forge. These puzzles tie into the lore. They're not arbitrary, they're using Dwemer principles. Blackreach is the ultimate Dwemer dungeon experience. It's massive. It's beautiful in a weird, otherworldly way. You can spend hours there and still find new areas. The combination of natural caverns and Dwemer construction creates this surreal environment. Giant glowing mushrooms next to bronze towers, waterfalls flowing past working machinery, and automatons everywhere, still patrolling after thousands of years. The environmental storytelling is strong. You find evidence of the Falmer-Dwemer conflict. Torture chambers suggest what the Dwemer did to their slaves. Work areas show where automatons were manufactured. Living quarters indicate how Dwemer actually lived. Research facilities contain experimental equipment. Every ruin tells a story if you pay attention. Tower of Mzark in Skyrim is particularly cool. It houses an Elder Scroll and has this intricate mechanism for accessing it. The oculary focuses starlight to locate artifacts. The scale and ambition of Dwemer engineering is on full display. You're solving a puzzle that's 4,000 years old using technology nobody fully understands. Late game, Dwemer ruins become farming spots. Need Dwarven metal ingots? Go clear a ruin and haul out all the scrap. Need to level smithing? Dwarven equipment is good for that. The ruins respawn enemies and loot, so you can return multiple times. The Dwemer have inspired tons of fan content, so let's talk about some notable examples. There's a mod for Skyrim called the Tools of Kagrenak, which is one of the most popular. It adds a fully voiced questline to recover all 3 of Kagrenak's tools and makes them as powerful as they were in Morrowind. You face new enemies, explore new dungeons, and encounter characters tied to the tool's history. The mod treats the lore seriously and gives players the god-killing weapons they remember. Legacy of the Dragonborn is a museum mod that lets you collect and display hundreds of artifacts, including tons of Dwemer items. It adds context and lore to Dwemer artifacts, making collecting them feel purposeful rather than just hoarding. Dwemer Spectres mods add ghost-like remnants of Dwemer to their ruins. These spectral enemies attack with tonal magic and provide a different kind of threat. Some versions suggest the Dwemer are trapped between planes of existence, conscious but unable to fully manifest. Project AHO is a quest mod that involves a hidden Dwemer settlement that's somehow still inhabited. It explores the possibility that some Dwemer survived or exist in a different state. The mod goes weird places metaphysically, which fits the weirdness of Dwemer lore. Clockwork is a player home mod inspired by Sodasill's Clockwork City. It's all Dwemer-style architecture and mechanisms. Living there feels like inhabiting a functional Dwemer facility. Countless armor and weapon mods expand on Dwarven equipment, giving you more variety in Dwemer-styled gear, sometimes adding powered armor concepts or steampunk aesthetics. Fan theories about the Dwemer are endless. Every Elder Scrolls forum has mega threads discussing what happened to them. People cite obscure lore books, analyze in-game clues, and construct elaborate theories involving Kim, dragon breaks, and metaphysical transformation. Artists draw Dwemer characters based on the brief glimpse we got in Morrowind's Tribunal expansion. They're depicted as sophisticated, intellectual, but also arrogant and cold. The popular fanon image is basically bearded elves in bronze-colored robes with tonal equipment and geometric accessories. Writers create stories about Dwemer culture before the disappearance, day-to-day life in their cities, the politics between clans, the debates among Tonal architects about Kagrenak's plan, family dramas, love stories, horror stories about what they did to the Falmer. Some fans want the Dwemer to return in future games. Others think that would ruin the mystery. The debate is ongoing. Bethesda has been clear they don't plan to bring the Dwemer back, which is probably the right call. Some mysteries should stay mysterious. The Dwemer have become iconic to Elder Scrolls. When people think of the series' unique elements, Dwemer ruins and robots are near the top of the list. No other fantasy setting has quite the same thing, this lost civilization of atheist engineer elves who built robots and vanished after trying to create a god. Now, we need to really dig into all the different theories about what happened to them, because this is where it gets really interesting, and people have come up with some wild ideas over the years. The zero-sum theory is probably one of the most philosophically complex explanations. There's this concept in Elder Scrolls metaphysics called Kim, which is basically realizing that you're part of a dream being dreamed by a sleeping godhead, but asserting your individuality anyway to avoid disappearing. Most people who achieve this realization without the willpower to maintain their sense of self just cease to exist, which is called zero-summing. Some people think the entire Dwemer race tried to achieve Kim simultaneously, and they all zero-summed at once. They realized they weren't real and couldn't maintain the mental fortitude to stay existing. Then there's the skin of the Numidium theory. This one suggests that when Kagrenac struck the heart, he actually succeeded in his goal, but not the way anyone expected. The entire Dwemer race was absorbed into the Numidium, becoming its skin, its soul, its power source. The brass god walks around, powered by the collective consciousness of an entire civilization. When the Numidium was active during later eras, it was literally using Dwemer souls as fuel. Some texts refer to the Numidium being skinned with the skin of the gods. Maybe that skin was actually made from the Dwemer themselves, metaphorically or literally. The calling theory is interesting because it ties into that idea of collective Dwemer consciousness. Maybe they all heard or felt something from another plane of existence and traveled there simultaneously. Not destroyed, not transformed, but relocated. They found a way to leave Mundus entirely and escape to somewhere else. Some realm of oblivion, Etherius, or maybe somewhere completely outside the known cosmology. They're not dead, they're just elsewhere, and they're not coming back. The brass tower paradox theory gets really weird with metaphysics. The Numidium is called the brass tower, and in Elder Scrolls lore there are these mythical towers that hold reality together. When Kagrenac activated the Numidium, or tried to, maybe he created a paradox in the fundamental structure of reality. The Dwemer got caught in that paradox and were erased from linear time. They exist and don't exist simultaneously. They're trapped in a state between being and non-being. Some people think it was divine punishment. Maybe Azura or another deity actually intervened directly. The Dwemer denied the gods, enslaved the Falmer, tried to steal divine power from Lorkhan's heart. Maybe one of the gods said enough and just removed them from existence. Though this seems less likely given what we know about how gods operate in Elder Scrolls. They tend to be more indirect. The simple accident theory says Kagrenac just miscalculated. He thought he understood tonal architecture and the heart's frequencies well enough to safely channel that power. He was wrong. The tonal wave that resulted from striking the heart disintegrated every Dwemer across Tamriel because they were all somehow connected to the same harmonic frequency. It's the most straightforward explanation, but it doesn't really explain why they disappeared, rather than just dying and leaving bodies. The success theory flips everything. What if Kagrenac did exactly what he set out to do? The goal was always to transcend mortal existence. The Dwemer succeeded. They've achieved their version of godhood and exist on a higher plane now. From their new perspective, mortal concerns don't matter anymore. They're beyond our comprehension. They don't care about Tamriel because they've moved past it. This is weirdly optimistic for such a dark mystery. There's a really dark variation where the Dwemer are still conscious but trapped. Imagine being locked in a state between existence and non-existence, aware but unable to interact with reality for thousands of years. You can see the mortal world but can't touch it or communicate. You're just stuck there, watching, helpless. That would be worse than death. Some of the Dwemer Spectre mods explore this idea. The distributed consciousness theory suggests the Dwemer didn't go anywhere physically. Their consciousness was distributed across their machines and constructs. Every automaton, every mechanism, every piece of Dwemer technology contains a fragment of Dwemer souls. They're still there in their cities, just not in a form we can recognize or communicate with. The machines aren't running on perpetual motion or soul gems, they're running on the distributed essence of their creators. Then you've got the Dragon Break complications. Multiple contradictory things happened at the Battle of Red Mountain simultaneously. Maybe in one timeline the Dwemer were destroyed, in another they transcended. In another they were absorbed into the Numidium. In another they succeeded completely. When reality became linear again, all of these outcomes merged somehow, and the result was that the Dwemer just weren't there anymore in any timeline. They fell through the cracks of broken time. Some scholars in-universe think the Dwemer are in Apocrypha, Hermaeus Mora's realm of forbidden knowledge. They sought ultimate understanding, and the Daedric Prince of Knowledge claimed them. Now they're part of his infinite library, their knowledge absorbed into his collection. This would be ironic, since they rejected the Daedra just as much as the Aedra. There's speculation that the Eshpiles in Dwemer ruins are them. But this doesn't really hold up because you find those Eshpiles everywhere, they respawn in gameplay, and we know the Dwemer disappeared simultaneously across all provinces. Plus, why would they turn to ash? Disintegration would leave nothing. The ash is probably just environmental detail or the remains of something else entirely. The tonal frequency mismatch theory is more technical. Kagrenak was trying to tune the entire Dwemer race to a new frequency, something that would elevate them beyond mortality. But the frequency he used was incompatible with Mundus itself. So the Dwemer were shifted out of phase with physical reality. They're still there, occupying the same space, but vibrating at a frequency that makes them unable to interact with our plane of existence, like radio signals on different channels. What's fascinating is that Yagrum Bagarn, the one Dwemer who survived, was in an outer realm when it happened. Whatever Kagrenak did, it affected Dwemer across all of Tamriel, but not in other planes of existence. So there's definitely a spatial or planar component to the disappearance. It wasn't just all Dwemer everywhere, it was all Dwemer in Mundus. Arniel Gain's experiment in Skyrim proves that whatever Kagrenak did can be replicated. Arniel used a warped soul gem instead of the heart and attempted the same process on a smaller scale. He vanished too. So it's reproducible. But we still don't know what the process actually does. Does it destroy, transform, relocate? We just know it makes people disappear. People have pointed out that the Dwemer disappearing is similar to what happens with mantling in Elder Scrolls lore. When you mantle a deity, you become them so completely that reality can't tell the difference. Maybe the entire Dwemer race mantled something collectively. They became something else so thoroughly that they ceased to be Dwemer. Here's the thing though. Every theory has problems. Every explanation leaves questions. That's probably intentional. Bethesda has crafted a mystery that can't be definitively solved, because any definitive answer would be less interesting than the speculation. Todd Howard knew what he was doing when he decided to never fully explain this. The mystery is better than any answer could be. And honestly, after playing these games for years and thinking about the Dwemer, I kind of agree. Some things should stay mysterious. Alright, now let's talk about accepting that we'll never really know for sure. Here's the thing about the Dwemer though. We'll probably never know what really happened to them, and that's okay. Bethesda could explain it. They could add a quest where you discover the truth. They could show you where the Dwemer went. They could bring them back. But they haven't, and they probably won't. Todd Howard has said in interviews that some mysteries are more interesting than any answer would be. The Dwemer disappearance is one of those. Any explanation would be disappointing compared to the speculation and theories and mystery. Imagine if the answer was just, they miscalculated and died, boring, or they transcended to another plane. Okay, but then what? Or they're trapped in the Numidium. Cool theory, but proving it definitively removes the mystery. The beauty of the Dwemer is that they invite endless speculation. Every player can have their own theory. Every scholar in universe has their interpretation. Multiple contradictory accounts can all be true in some sense thanks to dragon breaks and unreliable narrators. Yagrum Bagarn is the perfect character for this. He's the last living Dwemer, and even he doesn't know what happened. He searched for answers his entire extended life and found nothing. If the guy who was actually Dwemer can't figure it out, what chance do the rest of us have? The empty ruins are more powerful than any explanation. Walking through Blackreach, seeing the lights still on, the machines still running, the automatons still patrolling, it's haunting. These cities weren't destroyed, they were abandoned mid-activity. Everyone just vanished. The Dwemer achieved more than almost any other civilization in Tamriel. They built wonders that still function millennia later. They developed technology centuries or millennia ahead of everyone else. They came closer to godhood than any mortal race, except maybe the Tribunal, who used Dwemer methods. And then they were gone. Just gone. Whether that was failure or success, destruction or transcendence, punishment or reward, we don't know. Maybe Kagrenak succeeded perfectly and the Dwemer got exactly what they wanted. Maybe he failed catastrophically and killed them all. Maybe the truth is somewhere in between or completely different from anything we've imagined. The Falmer, remember, in their own broken way. The betrayed ones still live in the ruins of their oppressors, but they can't tell us what happened. They were enslaved when the Dwemer vanished. They just know their masters suddenly weren't there anymore. The heart of Lorkhan is gone now too. The Nerevarine destroyed it, or rather, destroyed its connection to Mundus, so even if someone wanted to try replicating Kagrenak's experiment, they couldn't. The opportunity is gone forever. Maybe that's for the best. The Dwemer tried to become gods and disappeared. Arniel Gain tried to replicate it on a small scale and vanished. Some experiments shouldn't be repeated. So that's the Dwemer, the deep folk, the dwarves who weren't dwarves, the atheist engineer elves who built robots and tried to become gods. They were brilliant, they were advanced, they were cruel to the Falmer, they were isolationist, they rejected the gods, they built wonders, they enslaved an entire race, they created the Numidium, they vanished without a trace. Everything they built still works, their cities still stand, their automatons still patrol, their mechanisms still turn. 4,000 years after they disappeared, you can walk into a Dwemer ruin and find everything functioning like they left yesterday. But nobody's there. The cities are tombs, the machines are guardians protecting nothing. The great works of Dwemer civilization stand empty. They left behind questions instead of answers. Where did they go? What was Kagrenak trying to do? Did he succeed or fail? Are the Dwemer dead, transformed, trapped, or transcended? We'll probably never know. Their impact on Tamriel lasted long past their disappearance. The Numidium shaped history for thousands of years. The Tribunal's power came from Dwemer research. Modern smiths use Dwemer metal. Scholars study Dwemer texts. Adventurers explore Dwemer ruins. The Falmer serve as a dark reminder of what the Dwemer were capable of. They didn't just defeat the snow elves in battle. They destroyed them slowly across generations, twisting them into something unrecognizable. That's the other side of Dwemer achievement, the willingness to do anything in pursuit of their goals. Maybe the Dwemer were right. Maybe the gods aren't worthy of worship. Maybe reality can be reshaped through understanding and will. Maybe mortality is a problem to be solved rather than accepted. Or maybe they were wrong. Maybe some mysteries shouldn't be solved. Maybe some powers shouldn't be touched. Maybe trying to become gods when you're mortal is the ultimate hubris. Either way, they're gone, and Tamriel remembers them. If you ever play an Elder Scrolls game and find yourself in a Dwemer ruin, take a moment. Look around. Listen to the machines. See the lights still glowing. Feel the steam from the pipes. Think about the people who built this. Think about their ambitions, their achievements, their failures. Think about how they built all of this to last forever, and how they didn't last at all. That's the Dwemer, the most fascinating mystery in Elder Scrolls lore, a civilization that mastered the physical world but couldn't master their own fate, a race that rejected the gods and tried to join them, engineers who built a god machine and disappeared when they used it, empty cities, working machines, unanswered questions, and a universe that's more interesting because they're gone. So yeah, that's everything there is to know about the Dwemer, or at least everything we can know. From their origins as Altmeri descendants who rejected the gods, through their mastery of tonal architecture and creation of impossible machines, to their mysterious disappearance at Red Mountain 4,000 years ago. We covered their cities and ruins across multiple provinces, their automatons that still protect those ruins, their betrayal and destruction of the Snow Elves, the Ethereum Wars, their relationship with the Chimer, Kagrenich and his tools, the Numidium project, the heart of Lorkhan, Yagrum Bagarn, the last of his kind. We talked about their appearances across the games, from Arena to ESO, their technology and metallurgy, their language and culture, their philosophy and rationalism, the theories about what happened to them, their impact on Tamriel's history. The Dwemer were complex. They were advanced beyond anything else in Tamriel. They were atheists in a world where gods demonstrably exist. They were brilliant engineers and cruel masters. They achieved immortality through their works, if not in their persons. And then they vanished, leaving behind only their machines and mysteries. If you made it through this whole video, thanks for sticking around. The Dwemer are one of my favorite parts of Elder Scrolls lore, because they're just so unique and mysterious. No other fantasy setting has quite this combination of elements. Let me know in the comments what your theory is about what happened to them. Did Kagrenac succeed? Did he fail? Are they dead or transformed, trapped or transcended? The beauty of this mystery is that everyone can have their own answer, and none of us will ever know for sure if we're right. Thanks for watching. Now go explore some Dwemer ruins and think about the people who built them.